Chapter 101, Negotiation. Nymeria did not leave at dawn. The road from Highgarden had been long. Men and horses needed rest, so the company did not break camp until the afternoon. Arthur rode with only Vic 6 as his standard-bearer, the banner of Starfall City snapping from the pike. Nymeria brought her full retinue and rode under two banners, the Sunspear of House Martell and the masked falcon of House Fowler of Skyreach. Snow, she teased as they rode, graceful in a shimmering lavender gown and a great silk cloak of cream and brass that snapped in the wind. Aren't you afraid the Dornish heat will melt you if you don't stay in the north? Arthur smiled. Only fire can melt me. It's a tradition here. Noble bastards unwilling to be ordinary, and younger sons often travel to make their own fortunes. Nymeria tilted her head and laughed. Her cloak hid dozens of blades and knives, and her mount was a golden sand steed with a white silk mane. As the daughter of the Red Viper, Prince Oberyn, and a Volontaine noblewoman, she had a beauty and charm that earned her the nickname Miss Nymeria. "Tell me," she said, "how did you beat the Vulture King and those barbarians?" They rode north, exchanging stories, and by the time they drew near a large tent flying the Bremon colors, they had the easy familiarity of two people who had spent a day in one another's company. An elderly Bremon knight with white hair met them at the canvas and ushered them inside, while their attendants were told to wait beyond the ropes. Several knights clustered within, shields propped near their chairs. Arthur recognized one device at once, a black vulture clutching a small pink babe on a yellow field, the arms of House Bremon. Nymeria's eyes went sharp when she saw it. "Sir Irvin?" she asked. The knight on the chair rose partway, eyes sweeping them both. "You are Nymeria Sand?" he said. "And you, Arthur Snow, commander of the Starfall host? Bold of you to come so far." Arthur bowed. "I am acting as envoy for my uncle, Prince Doran. You should know Countess Laura Bremon swore fealty to Prince Doran," Nymeria cut in. "It is known," the white-haired knight said, with a curt nod. Other voices in the tent answered in agreement. "Brightspear has always held Dorne's northern marches," one man said. "We face Riverlanders and raiding tribes on that border." "Our loyalty to Prince Doran is unquestioned," another added. Nymeria inclined her head. "Loyal lords." Then she turned her eyes on Sir Irvin. "Now that the Vulture King is dead and the barbarians routed, I order you to withdraw your troops, return to Bremon, and escort Lady Allery safely to Highgarden." Irvin bristled. "That's not fair," he snapped. "Starfall asked our aid and got nothing in return. Not only did they refuse us what we are owed, but they insulted us. This man sent a letter," he thumped a folded scrap of parchment on the table, "in which he said he'd already killed one vulture and wouldn't mind killing another." Arthur's face went cold. "Respect is mutual. Did you think to respect Starfall when your men plundered our farmers on the march? Did you think of Starfall when you kept Lady Allery in Bremon?" Irvin's nostrils flared. "I did no such thing. She was wounded and resting in Bremon." "That is your tale," Nymeria said. "My uncle does not take stories for truth." She smiled, a little dangerously. "I asked for Arthur's presence. Do you intend to seize a messenger while I stand here?" Irvin sprang to his feet. "Miles, Fer, take him," he barked. Two guards moved to drag Arthur from the chair. His hand slid to the hilt at his waist, and the room tightened like a drawn bow. A guard reached for him, and a dagger flew in an arc, burying itself in the man's palm. He howled and clutched at blood, dropping back. Nymeria's hand already closed on the haft of the dagger. Irvin's hand went to his sword. "Nymeria Sand," he stormed. "Do you dare seize him in front of me?" she asked coolly. "Arthur is here at my request." "You slander our house," Irvin hissed. "Madame Allery was but injured, healing in Bremon." "Words can't take flesh, but knives can," Nymeria replied, and pulled the dagger free. She flicked the blade so a dark bead of blood flew off onto the table. "House Fowler's men are marching to Highgarden under Prince Doran's command. Perhaps when they arrive we can settle questions of fairness." Irvin opened his mouth, ready to argue. Then Nymeria slammed the dagger point first into the table between them, wood splintering with the sound. "Or, if you prefer," she added, voice low and cold, "my father, Oberyn Martell, could bring tens of thousands of Dornish spears to your gates to discuss it." The name hit the tent like a blow. Arthur felt the hands of knights loosening from their hilts. Irvin's face went pale, and his defiance faltered. The white-haired knight who had first greeted them took 2 hurried steps forward. "Calm yourself, Miss Nymeria," he said, quick to mediate. "We will withdraw our men. The Vulture King being dead, Bremon has no reason to remain." Irvin sank back into his chair, defeated. "We will send Lady Allery back," he muttered. Outside the tent, Arthur let out a long breath. He had expected nothing good. If Irvin had tried to arrest him, Arthur had planned to take Irvin hostage and fight their way out, or at the very least seize Nymeria nearby to ensure their escape. He had not expected Nymeria to leap to his defense so swiftly, to throw a knife without hesitation, or to name her powerful family with such cool menace. Status means little without timing. She had used both with perfect sense. Nymeria watched him with a faint smile as she sheathed the dagger. "Snow," she said, "if I hadn't moved, what were you going to do? Draw your sword?" Arthur did not lie. "I would have taken a prisoner, escaped first, and then thought of other matters." "Do you know why I struck first?" she asked. "To do justice?" He offered. Nymeria laughed softly. "Justice? I'm no knight and not a lord. I don't pretend to uphold justice." "Then why?" Arthur asked. "My father told me once that beauty is a woman's weapon," she said, eyes bright. "I think that applies to men as well. You are better pleasing to the eye than those Bremen folk, especially those violet eyes of yours." Arthur watched her mount her golden sand steed, feeling the warmth of a hand he had not expected. He realized with a sudden, sheepish clarity that he had just been hit on. Chapter 102. Finally got the fief. 7 days after the Bremon family withdrew their troops at Miss Nymeria's urging, Madame Allery was safely sent to Highgarden. She looked exhausted and haggard, but bore no visible wounds. When Miss Nymeria learned of her imprisonment in Bremon City, she expressed deep regret and explained that the matter had ended with the death of the Vulture King. She asked Madame Allery not to publicize it, to avoid rekindling hostilities between Starfall City and Bremon. Madame Allery only nodded. "Miss Nymeria, thank you for saving me. I only want to return home to Broken Elbow Bend. I ask for nothing more." The next morning, Madame Allery left Highgarden by carriage without visiting anyone else. She was frightened, Miss Nymeria sighed when she heard. "I have also completed the task my uncle set me. It is time for me to leave." Before Miss Nymeria departed, Arthur presented her with a black mamba dagger made at Highgarden's smithy as a token of personal gratitude. Arthur remained in Highgarden another week. During that time, he disbanded the levies raised by various vassals along the Middle Torrent and arranged for thousands of barbarian prisoners from Vulture Watch to be settled at Highgarden. He only ordered the Starfall Direct Army to escort the captives back to Starfall City after Lord Sir Avery of Knight's Rest Keep, who had not joined the war because he had been suppressing bandits, arrived. With the Vulture King dead and Bremen withdrawn, the external threats to Starfall City had diminished, and internal problems came to the fore. What to do with the captives, how to punish disloyal vassals, and how to reward those who had served well. Handled wisely, these matters would be opportunities to restore Starfall's prestige and centralize authority. The escort moved slowly, and Arthur led the army home 5 days later. Upon the army's triumphant return, Starfall held a grand victory feast. Besides the main hall, tents were set up outside the castle to feed the soldiers. The main hall's table bore Dornish fare, purple olives, light bread, chili cheese, and summer red to drink. Bards sang as servants brought dish after dish in the same order. Arthur had seen at feasts in Winterfell. Everything presented first to the lord at the high table for tasting and selection. Arthur sat beside his cousin, the young Earl Edric, who had been his squire, and selected what he liked. Preferring milder flavors where he could, he chose a portion of honey-roasted capon and a small half-rack of ribs and a leg from a honey-roasted goat stuffed with raisins, onions, mushrooms, and dragon peppers. He instructed Edric on how to distribute certain dishes as gestures of favor. The grilled snake meat with mustard seeds and dragon peppers he gave to Viscount Dimitri, who had recommended the dish. A spicy seven-snake soup simmered with dragon peppers, blood oranges, and a touch of venom went to Sir Williams for his brave command of the right flank. Lamprey pie to Sir Craig of Vulture Watch. A refreshing sorbet to the exhausted and silent Madame Allery. Whiskered fish to Lord Sir Vane of Linksha Keep, and a few slices of raw large onion to Lord Sir Avery of Knight's Rest Keep, who had arrived only after the fighting ended. The feast ran from dusk into the night. When it broke up, Arthur went to the small council chamber where they usually met. His aunt Illyria, his cousin Edric, Master Riswell, and the old instructor Craig were already there. Several candles burned, and the discussion turned to the rewards and punishments that would be announced the next day and the disposition of the barbarian captives. Arthur, Master Riswell, and the old instructor led the debate while Illyria and Edric listened. They worked late. Only when Illyria began to yawn and Edric had fallen asleep in her arms did they conclude. Because many vassals were still drunk the next morning, the formal grants were delayed until noon. Arthur returned to the lordly hall, where his aunt and cousin sat upon the white stone seat of Starfall's lordship. The rewards had already been decided. Arthur's fief would be Lighthouse Keep, the castle and lands of Lord Edric, whose head Arthur had taken, and the Violet Canyon on the west bank of the Torrent River, territory formerly occupied by the barbarians. Master Oswell had declared Lighthouse Keep a reward for Arthur's deeds, and the Violet Canyon a compensation from Starfall City for entrusting him with the resettlement of the captives. After Illyria announced the grants, Arthur knelt and swore fealty. When he had finished the formalities and returned to the crowd, Illyria nodded to the old instructor. The old instructor called out, "Lord Sir Avery of Knight's Rest, keep, step forward." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Many of the vassals who had borne the greatest burdens in the campaign frowned. "Why is Sir Avery called so early?" they whispered. "He arrived after the fighting. What could he have earned?" Their comments hardened into open scorn. Sir Avery looked surprised as he stepped forward, and the hubbub continued until the old instructor roared for silence. Illyria spoke plainly. "Sir Avery, you refused Starfall's decree and failed in your duties as a vassal. You disguised yourself as a brigand and plundered passing merchant caravans. Such actions are without honor and bring shame upon yourself and Starfall City. Do you admit your guilt?" Sir Avery's face went white. "My lady, you cannot. Do you remember your oath to Starfall?" the old instructor demanded, rising and leaning on his sword. "Do you recall the vows you took to be a knight?" Sir Williams, his legs still bandaged, spat from the front row. "A disgrace! A coward! Who knighted you?" Sir Craig of Vulture Watch added, "If you call yourself a Dorn man, own up to it." Then, turning to Illyria on the high table, "If Sir Avery asks for trial by combat, I would be honored to fight in Starfall's name and wash away this shame." Before Illyria could answer, several more knights jumped to their feet, clamoring for the chance to strike down Sir Avery. The pressure in the hall mounted. Sir Avery paled further. Illyria waited until the clamor died down. "For the sake of the seven, I spare you the death penalty," she said. "You will take the black and go to the wall. I strip you of half your lands. The remainder, your ancestral castle and title, will be held for your legitimate heir, to be bestowed upon him after you lead the men who swear to join the Night's Watch to the wall, and I receive confirmation from the Lord Commander. I plead guilty." Sir Avery fell to his knees. "Thank you, merciful lady. May the seven bless you and Starfall City." One by one, the vassal knights who had earned rewards came forward to receive them. Besides spoils and coin, the territories taken from Sir Avery and portions of the West Bank formerly occupied by the barbarians were distributed among the meritorious. Deals and exchanges were made under Starfall's witness, smoothing the transfer of lands. Within 3 days, most vassals departed for their new holdings. Sir Williams proved the biggest beneficiary after Arthur and the old instructor. Promoted from a landed knight to a baron, he received most of the lands stripped from Knight's Rest Keep, consolidating his rise in status. Chapter 103, Dealing with Savage Captives. Having been granted the lordship of Lighthouse Keep and Violet Canyon, Arthur finally crossed the class barrier from bastard to landed baron. With his title came responsibilities, governing the 2 territories and managing a large number of barbarian captives. He had known something of both holdings when he chose them. Lighthouse Keep sat on the south bank of Starfall City, a coastal castle with its attached lands, 3 villages, a fishing hamlet, and a sept. It was suited to farming, port development, and general administration. Violet Canyon, on the west bank of the Torrent River, had been laid waste by earlier barbarian raids and occupation, but it was a blank slate with lush grass for grazing, mountains at its back, and a river at its side. Carl By had also found rich iron deposits there. With the Vulture King dead, the Red Mountain barbarians were less of a threat. Comparing the two, Arthur saw much greater development potential in Violet Canyon, and because it was also where most of the captives were held, he decided to focus his immediate efforts there. First, he organized his people. Maester Hubert, whom Arthur had already named acting castellan, remained in charge of Lighthouse Keep and its territory. Accountant Pete and Carl By were sent to Violet Canyon with the craftsmen and swordsmen brought from Bravos and the refugees they had taken in. Pete's job was to recruit laborers and farmers, to set up camps and housing, to create pastures and kitchen gardens, and to lay out essential infrastructure. Carl By led the craftsmen to build the long-awaited smithing quarter and to open the initial quarries and mines. Arthur himself took responsibility for the barbarian captives. The old training camp downstream on the torrent, where the old instructor had once gathered and drilled levies, was now a prison for the barbarians. In the Highland battle against the Vulture King, many had fled, but nearly 1,500 strong-bodied captives had been taken, mostly young men. They were a problem. Slavery was forbidden in Westeros, so selling them was out of the question. Ransom was pointless with the barbarians. Releasing them without conditions risked another Vulture King emerging from Red Mountain one day, and another wave of raids. But slaughtering 1,500 prisoners would ruin the reputation of Starfall City's nobility. Battlefield glory was one thing, massacring prisoners quite another. Arthur treated the problem the way he treated most problems: classify, incentivize, and delegate. He sorted the captives by the crimes they had committed and told them plainly that freedom would be granted only if they accepted labor reform to atone. To sweeten the deal, he promised 3 meals a day during their period of atonement. Meals that, by Dornish commoners' standards, were generous, although in truth the rations were meager: thin loaves of black bread and a little salted fare. Portions would be adjusted according to each man's crimes and his loyalty. To cut management costs and to reduce the captives' hatred toward Dornish overseers, Arthur implemented a classic "let heroes bury heroes, let good men fight good men" plan. He recruited among the barbarians themselves a tribe that had long been bullied by the others, the Stone Sheep tribe, to run the camp. Starfall City guards were assigned only to monitor the Stone Sheep and to catch any escapees. Food distribution, punishment, and daily supervision were left to the Stone Sheep captains. Within 3 days, the camp's mood had shifted. The roaring defiance of "free folk do not kneel" gave way to howls begging for labor reform so they could atone and earn their release. Generous Arthur accepted their requests. The first project he set for them was the construction of a bridge to join the east and west banks of the Torrent River. Pete and the architect Quentin had already discussed the site before Arthur sent them west. It would stand near the 4-story watchtower by the river, originally a lookout against crossings and a warning post. "Arthur," Quentin said, pointing at piles of stone and timber beside the watchtower. "Pete prepared the stone and wood when they built the tower. There's no need for more quarrying or logging right away." "Are you sure?" Arthur asked, hopeful. "If materials are short, say so. Our barbarian brothers have endless strength for atonement." The Stone Sheep chief beside him barked a laugh and nodded. "Endless strength," he said, though sweat gleamed on his brow. Quentin waved him off. "No, there's plenty of material, but the construction will be difficult and dangerous from here on." Arthur's eyes brightened at the words. "Tell me the specifics. If it's hard, our barbarian brothers will overcome it. If it's dangerous, they'll take the risk." Quentin explained that the river's width required an arch bridge supported on 2 foundations. One could use the natural large rock in the middle of the torrent as one pier. The other would need a man-made foundation, wooden piles driven into the riverbed, and a stone slab raft laid on top. Arthur frowned at the idea of merely driving piles straight into the riverbed. Though he did not much value barbarian lives, he did not want to provoke a riot by seeming wantonly reckless. The chief's face turned pale as he shook his head. Quentin, however, offered the proper method. "My plan was to erect a cofferdam of planking, clay, and piles to enclose the work area. Then drain it with barrels or manual pumps so men can labor in the dry, Quentin said. But it's not the dry season. The torrent runs fast below here. A cofferdam risks collapse under the current. That's true, Arthur said after a moment. If you fear collapse, use large stones to ballast the cofferdam and reduce the flow's impact. Quentin's eyes lit up. You know about foundations? That would help enormously. He went on to set out further details. Pile driving could be done with iron-headed mallets or by drop hammers powered by animals. Stonemasons should cut stones to precise dimensions using hammers, chisels, and metal rules. Each block must match its drawing to avoid cumulative error. He wanted standardized production and careful oversight. Do it boldly, according to your plan, Arthur said at last, satisfied. Quentin, a craftsman of Bravos, clearly knew his trade. Quentin, Arthur added, when this bridge is done, I'll reward you with 100 gold dragons. Quentin's face did not change from its seriousness. Thank you, Lord. I will give it my all. Arthur turned to the Stone Sheep chief. Tell our barbarian brothers that this bridge will stand for the peaceful coexistence of barbarians and Dornishmen. It is their bridge of atonement, their bridge to freedom. I expect them to leave an indelible mark on it. The chief thumped his chest, pulled out a stick-shaped scrap of black bread from his belt, an outward show of his resolve, and waved it twice. No slacking, he said. Then he barked, half to himself and half to the captives. Work! Build the bridge, earn your freedom. Chapter 104. Violet Canyon Bridge construction was now in full swing, but Arthur did not relax his training of the captured barbarians for a moment. He stayed in the 4-story watchtower so he could see the bridge, the workmen, and the prisoners at all times. There were over 1,000 barbarian captives to keep an eye on, and he had only 50 guards and 10 cavalry borrowed from Starfall City under Lord Bard's command. He had also rehired 50 former conscripts with spears, paid 30 copper stars a day from the disbanded troops. Landless commoners and second sons were eager for the wage. The conscripts, hardened by battle, were braver and steadier now and looked respectable holding their spears. Bang, bang, bang! Jimmy Sunderland knocked and came in carrying a basin of bloody meat. Arthur, the boat to the other side is ready. Arthur kept his head down, eating the plain bread and purple olives on the table. While I'm away from the tower, make sure Lord Bard keeps a tight watch on the barbarians. Don't let anything slip. Understood. Jimmy set the basin in a corner. A large cage hung there, holding the huge vulture king Arthur had shot with 2 arrows. Jimmy's shoulder wound had mostly healed from the earlier fight. He stood at a distance from the cage, holding the basin and tossing chunks of meat inside. Arthur, when do you think this thing will tame? It's been almost a month, and it's still so wild. Jimmy remembered the time he'd tried to tease the bird after noticing an injured wing. He'd reached too close and been pecked. His hand bled, adding to an old wound. That painful lesson kept him from approaching the cage again. He preferred to throw meat from afar and watch the vulture flap and tear at the food. How Arthur had managed to shoot it down and capture it still seemed impossible to Jimmy. Slowly, don't rush it. Arthur washed down his bread with a cup of summer red. We have time to break it in. After warning Jimmy not to get near the cage, Arthur went downstairs and crossed the river by boat to Violet Canyon. From the river, he could see the weir the barbarians were building under Quentin's orders and the Xiang tribe leader's supervision. The weir leaked in places. Arthur watched a few barbarians at the mouth passing buckets to bail out the water. Nearby, a simple crane lowered wooden piles into the weir one by one. Working people have always been practical, he thought. He reached the far bank quickly, rode Zephyr, and in less than 15 minutes arrived at Account Book Pete's camp. The camp was basic: animal skin tents, a ring of sharpened wooden stakes, yards piled with wood and stone, tools stashed in the tents. Cheap to erect and easy to move, these temporary settlements weren't comfortable, but they were serviceable. When Arthur arrived, people crowded the center of the camp where the cook and assistants were serving soup. A black mamba swordsman guided him to a tent where Pete and Carl By were talking. Carl looked drawn and bloodshot as Arthur entered. "What were you doing last night?" Arthur asked. "Don't ask." Carl rubbed his eyes. "It never ends here." He glanced at Arthur with a dark expression. "Animal howls come down from Red Mountain every night. Sleep is impossible. Pete added, "It's not just Carl. Many people in the tents are terrified of barbarians or wild beasts coming down from the mountain. They can't sleep and they're exhausted by morning, especially the refugees who escaped barbarian raids, those who fled to the East Bank. Now they're coming back to the West Bank and living in a daze." Arthur nodded. Starting a settlement from scratch was always hard. He tried to reassure them. "There are a lot of problems and conditions are harsh. We'll take it step by step. First, watchtowers, guard towers, and shelters." Then Arthur went to inspect the iron mine and the crude quarry beside it. The quarry didn't require deep digging. Workers simply gathered rough stone exposed on the surface. "It's close to Red Mountain, so stone is easy to get, and wood is available too," Pete reported. "What we lack most are food and basic tools. Those must be shipped by boat from the other side. And the biggest issue is manpower. Workers, farmers, craftsmen, shepherds, guards. We're short of everything." "Can't you recruit with higher wages?" Arthur asked. Pete shook his head and gave a bitter smile. "We can't. Even with higher pay, people won't come." News of the war with the Vulture King spread. "Even though we won, the commoners are frightened. They'd rather stay on the East Bank than move here near Red Mountain. This place is a wilderness. There's nothing to attract them." "Maybe it will get better once houses, watchtowers, and a bridge are up," Arthur said. He knew development couldn't be rushed. He'd built Peach Orchard residence in Wolfswood the same way, step by step. Pete thought for a moment. "There's another problem. People need spiritual comfort. Many here are frightened. If we could get a Seven Gods monk to preach, it might calm them." Arthur considered that. In desperate, anxious times, faith could be a balm. Simple sermons were often exactly what struggling commoners needed. "Ordinary commoners are reluctant to come," he said, "and the monks willing to come." He sighed inwardly. It looked like he might have to compel someone. After discussing Violet Canyon's problems with Pete, Arthur spent the afternoon surveying the surrounding area. When he returned to the 4-story watchtower by boat, he realized how isolated the place was. Apart from Pete and the few hundred settlers in Violet Canyon, there was no one else. No shepherds, no nearby homesteads. The valley floor was overrun with weeds and trees, wild animals, and flocks of birds nesting on the faces of the Red Mountain. At the mountain's foot, he found the remains of long-abandoned field ridges and dilapidated houses, and a few stone sheep pens likely built by barbarians before they were driven out. Violet Canyon lacked people, desperately so. Chapter 105, Savage Diversion. That night, in the 4-story watchtower. "Deliver this letter to my aunt, Illyria." Arthur handed the folded note to Jimmy. "Give it to Master Oswell, and have him send it on to the lighthouse keep." Jimmy stowed it carefully. "Understood." Not long after Jimmy left, a servant knocked and brought dinner. Tonight's spread was simple Dornish fare: thin bread, purple olives, a whole roasted goat, and a pot of thick, milky crucian carp soup. There was more than one man could eat alone. Every night, Arthur invited Lord Bard, who oversaw the guards, Shigu, leader of the Stone Sheep tribe and in charge of supervising the captives, and Quentin, the chief engineer, to dine and report on the captives and the bridge work. Also present was the vulture, kept in a cage in the room. A servant handed Arthur a roasted goat leg. The bird shrank back into a corner with its wings folded, only its fierce eyes fixed on the meat. At the table, Lord Bard stripped a few ribs with his fingers. "Arthur, when do you think this vulture will turn?" he asked. Shigu sipped his wine, summer red, and said, "I haven't trained birds, but I know herding. When sheep disobey, you beat them. Those that resist hard, you kill and eat. Training birds isn't much different. You can't be soft." Arthur shook his head. "I try to be kind. I can't bring myself to be cruel." Shigu's mouth twitched. He'd seen Arthur in battle, charging in and out of the barbarians 7 times, sword in hand, and knew Arthur could be merciless. Shigu had used Arthur's reputation to keep the barbarian captives in line. Barbarians respected strength. Arthur tossed the goat leg into the vulture's cage, then went back to the table. The bird waited until Arthur had stepped away before it began to peck. Quentin was the first to report on the bridge construction. "After the cofferdam piling, the workable area is small. To be honest, we don't need that many laborers." "Most of the men are stuck on the shore," Arthur said, dipping his bread into the soup. I told them to process stone and timber into the sized blocks and sleepers will need for the deck. Arthur had already noticed the surplus of laborers from the tower. He had intended to put the barbarian captives to work in Violet Canyon, but Violet Canyon sat too close to Red Mountain and had no camps for housing or managing prisoners, a risky place if captives tried to escape. He'd kept them training on the east bank, not allowed to cross the river. "Leader," Arthur said, swallowing his bread and looking at Shigu, "how is the training of those captives going? Have you classified them the way I asked, by work performance, attitude toward atonement, and the severity of their crimes?" Shigu replied, "We did. I picked out more than 100, Arthur. They've never tried to escape, they obey supervision well, and their crimes were relatively minor." Arthur glanced at Lord Bard. Bard set down his ribs and wiped his hands. "It's true," he said. "Shigu has separated the better-behaved ones and given them better food." "Good work," Arthur said, standing to pour more wine into Shigu's cup. "My construction needs people. If the captives you've trained prove themselves, I won't treat you or your tribe unfairly. In addition to daily wages for you and your people, I'll reward you extra silver for every well-trained man." Shigu gripped the cup with both hands. "Extra silver?" Arthur smiled. "For those first 100, if they truly are, as you say, obedient and secure, I'll give you 10 gold dragons. If the rest of the 1,500 can be trained the same way, I'll pay 10 gold dragons for every 100, 150 gold in total." Shigu blinked, confirming, 1 gold dragon equals 50 silver stags? When Arthur nodded, Shigu's eyes lit up. His tribe raised and traded goats. An adult goat fetched about 1 gold dragon in normal trade, sometimes less. The thought of gold made his heart race. Why herd goats when he could work for Arthur and live well? He fired off another question before he could stop himself. "Arthur, I still have clansmen in Red Mountain. Can I call them down to help?" "Of course," Arthur said. "Violet Canyon needs people, and I'll pay them wages. When the bridge is nearly finished and both banks are connected, if you can call other tribes down from the mountain to work, I'll reward you for each person you bring. These willing tribesmen are different from the prisoners doing forced labor. I'll pay wages based on daily work. The jobs will be set by demand. They can choose freely. No coercion." Shigu hardly ate. "I'll send for them now," he said and hurried out, eager. Lord Bard, still gnawing a bone, stood. "Should we send someone to escort his people into Red Mountain?" Arthur shook his head. "No need. The stone sheep will come willingly. Good pay, lighter work, and prestige beats poor, remote goat herding every time. Besides, they've offended other tribes up the mountain. If anyone rioted and escaped, Shigu and his people would be the first to suffer. They have no incentive to run." Bard sat back and sighed admiringly. "You have a way with people, Arthur. Tomorrow, arrange 5 guards and 5 conscripted soldiers to take those 100-plus captives to Violet Canyon and put them under Pete's supervision," Arthur instructed. Bard shoved bread into his mouth and thumped the table with a bone to show he understood. Quentin, who had been quiet, asked, "What about the rest of the idle captives?" "Have Shigu put them to work repairing the road from Starfall City to Highgarden," Arthur said after a moment. "Pick them out slowly. Better too few than too many. And expand this watchtower. Future tolls from the bridge can fund defensive upgrades. That will be useful too." Chapter 106, Religious and Secular Mobilization. After Illyria, the saint of Starfall City, finished her prayers before the statues of the 7 gods, she turned to the monk standing beside her, censer in hand, and presiding over the ceremony. "Alice," she said, "my nephew Arthur has written to say he is willing to build a church of the 7 gods on his lands and donate a large area of adjoining fields and forests to it. But he says he lacks a monk of sufficient ability and steadfast faith to oversee the construction and manage the church afterward. Will you dedicate yourself to the 7 gods and go there to supervise its building and run it?" Brother Alice blinked in confusion. "Lady Illyria, doesn't Arthur worship the old gods? Why would he build a church to the 7 gods?" "Have you not always hoped my nephew would convert?" Illyria asked. "He may be considering it. This is a rare opportunity, Alice." Alice thought for a moment and felt the point. "Lady, you know I am a devout servant of the 7 gods. For their glory, I will accept this important task." Illyria nodded. Very well, devout Aeolus. Pack your things today. Tomorrow, gather whoever you need at the Dawn Market, and then go to Violet Canyon. Alice bowed. I will pack at once and head to the lighthouse. He stopped, his face paling, and turned back. Lady, did you say Lighthouse Keep or Violet Canyon? Illyria corrected him gently. Not Lighthouse Keep, Violet Canyon. It's by the Red Mountain, the old territory of the barbarians. Arthur had specifically said in his letter that whoever went must be a monk of firm and devout faith in the seven gods, because he intended to bring the seven gods' teaching to the barbarians later. At the mention of teaching the barbarians, Alice went even paler. He hesitated, and Illyria pointed to the newly lit candles before the statues. Monk, she said, for the sake of the seven gods, I trust you're not thinking of backing out. This? Alice managed a smile that looked more like a grimace. It would be my honor. There is no greater duty than spreading the word of the seven gods. He returned to his chamber in a discouraged, resolved fog, packed his belongings, and planned to find Illyria again to beg off. If she refused, he thought, he would try to slip away on the road. But when he stepped outside, the courtyard was full of people, all familiar faces from the castle. Even old Master Oswell stood nearby, supported by a squire. The stablemaster cried, Alice, I never thought you, who are afraid of horses, would have such courage to volunteer for Violet Canyon and to bring the seven gods to the barbarians of the Red Mountain. The laundry maid stepped forward, cheeks flushed. Monk, forgive me for having suspected you of being that rogue who stole women's clothes. I never expected you to be so brave. May the seven gods bless you. One by one, more people came forward to speak respectfully and bid him farewell. Alice stared blankly at each familiar face. He tried to speak, but could find no words. Hot tears slid from the corners of his eyes. The last to speak was Master Oswell. Relief softened the old man's features. Child, the road will be hard. You have given your heart to the seven gods. I will wait for good news in Starfall City. The barbarians are quick-tempered and rough. When you preach, do not be too forceful. Keep your own safety foremost. Master Oswell, Alice started. Oswell smiled faintly. Do not worry. I will send Sir Barton to protect you, and Arthur will send some of his squires. They will accompany you to Starfall Port in the Dawn Market to recruit those willing to go to Violet Canyon. Alice forced a smile. Thank you for all you have done. Thank you all for coming to see me off. May the seven gods bless you. When he left the city, he did so surrounded by Sir Barton, Jimmy, and a handful of guards. They traveled down the Torrent River to the 4-story watchtower, where Arthur awaited him. Arthur had already gathered more than 150 devout men and women from Starfall Port and the Dawn Market who were willing to go to Violet Canyon. Aeolus, Arthur said warmly as he shook the monk's hand. I've heard the news. I didn't think you'd volunteer. Aeolus answered solemnly, To spread the word of the seven gods is my duty as their servant. Then he turned to the gathered crowd. The harsher the conditions, the truer our faith is proved. The seven gods will bless the devout. Nearly everyone looked at him with reverence. Many voiced their agreement. All suffering is the fruit of sin. Belief in the seven gods and spreading their word can wash that away. All hardship will pass. There will be a brighter tomorrow. The Father is just, the Mother merciful. The trials now are the blessings we will enjoy later. Arthur listened without interrupting, watching as the monk worked the crowd with a smooth tongue. Clergy knew how to move hearts. In settling and governing a new, bare territory, religion's appeal and the low cost of its governance were a unique advantage. No wonder lords loved to grant land for churches. It displayed piety, burnished reputations, encouraged settlement, and raised taxes. When times were truly desperate, a church could also feed the people. After Arthur promised Alice the funds and materials to build the church and signed a contract granting the new church rights to the adjoining fields and forest, Alice and his group set off by boat for Violet Canyon. Along with brother Ailes, Arthur had arranged for hundreds of craftsmen and farmers that Meister Hubert had gathered from Lighthouse Keep and its dependent lands. As Lord of Lighthouse Keep, Arthur offered them tax breaks, guaranteed 3 meals a day while they worked in Violet Canyon, and a generous monthly wage at the end of each month. The head craftsman stared in disbelief. My lord, is all this true? When Arthur nodded, the craftsmen and the hundreds behind him sank to their knees in a rustle. "My lord, we thank you for your mercy. We will serve faithfully." "May the new and old gods grant you long lives," someone murmured. Arthur was pleased with their reaction. He helped the head craftsman to his feet. "As Lord of Lighthouse Keep, I will not mistreat loyal subjects who answer my call. From now on, you will see not only my benevolence but other merits as well, like the Dawn Sword of old." Chapter 107, Territory Development. A year and a half had passed since Arthur was granted his fief and accepted the barbarian captives. In that time, he had poured most of his energy into developing his 2 territories, training the captives, instructing his squire Edric, and helping Starfall City administer the region. Standing on the balcony of his room at Starpost, Arthur sighed. By the count of years, he should have already celebrated his 15th name day. Starpost was a newly built, modest castle. 5 bastions had been added around the original 4-story watchtower on the bank of the Torrent River, then linked with a curtain wall to enclose a broad area. In the center lay a courtyard and the main keep for storing food and water and for people to live in. This was Arthur's current residence. Beside the courtyard were purpose-built buildings for war horses, pack horses, and other beasts of burden. The stables had roofs and troughs, and 1/3 of the space inside the curtain wall was fenced off as an open corral so the horses could rest in stalls and also stretch their legs, graze, and breathe fresh air. Next to the corral were workers' dormitories and a hay warehouse for feed. 2 gates pierced the curtain wall to the northeast and southwest. Built in stone, each had battlements and murder holes. The northeast gate faced a completed arched stone bridge that spanned the torrent. The bridge's foundations had held firm against the river's force. Its deck was wide enough for 3 carriages abreast, and small and medium rowboats passed easily beneath its arches. To the southwest, near the road, clusters of dwellings and simple inns had sprung up. A small caravan post stood there as well, a plain rectangular building offering basic conveniences for merchants and travelers, places to rest and recover, and stabling for horses and carriages, so urgent letters, perishables, and other necessities could be sent through day and night. Starpost's location, on the river, beside the bridge between Starfall City and Highgarden, made it a natural supply and transfer hub. Arthur had intended it as a center for raising horses and running a post. In peacetime, it handled the movement of goods and raised revenue. In wartime, it could mobilize troops quickly to strengthen Starfall City's control over the surrounding lands. He scanned the landscape until a dark shape streaked across the sky. Arthur stepped inside as a servant held a basin of bloody meat. Before he reached the adjacent room, he heard the short, harsh calls of the vulture. Pushing the door open, he saw the massive bird, wings spread, settle onto a wooden perch as thick as an arm. The room was semi-open and built as a vulture's nest to make entry and exit easy. Arthur tossed pieces of meat from the basin to the bird, watching as it flapped and pecked obediently at each morsel. "Arthur, the horses are ready. We can set off for Violet Canyon now," Vickwood called from the corridor. "Understood." Arthur wiped his hands with a towel the servant handed him. Down in the stables, his 3 attendants and Squire Edric waited by the horses. Zack was the standard-bearer, carrying the banner of Starfall City. Arthur's party of 6 crossed the arched bridge and rode toward Violet Canyon. Edric, on a small pony, asked, "Cousin, will this completely solve the problem of the barbarians in the Red Mountain?" Arthur shook his head. "Not necessarily, but it's only a matter of time. People find it easy to go from frugality to luxury, but hard to return from luxury to frugality." Compared to the transformation of the 4-story watchtower into Starpost, the changes at Violet Canyon were even more extensive. The canyon had been planned into 3 distinct zones: the mining area, the blacksmith quarter, and the pastures. The mining area hugged the foot of Red Mountain. Warning watchtowers and a small mountain fort guarded the mines, where simple shafts and surface workings yielded iron ore. The workforce was a mix of former barbarian captives, Dornish laborers drawn by wages, and free barbarians from the Red Mountain. Some captives released for good behavior had chosen to stay because of the pay and treatment. The pasture lands occupied the lowlands in the canyon's middle. Employed members of the Stone Sheep tribe grazed cattle, sheep, and horses there. Hay for Starpost's warehouse came from these fields. Ailes the monk's church was built in this area too. Congregants cultivated vegetable gardens, tended orchards, and raised poultry and goats. The church handled prayers, weddings, funerals, and other rites for followers of the Seven in Violet Canyon and nearby settlements. Along the torrent, the blacksmith quarter ran in a line of workshops. Or from the mining area, charcoal purchased from other territories and resins and adhesives were all brought here for processing. Apprentices worked bloomery furnaces and bellows to make bloom iron from ore and charcoal. Near the river, a water wheel drove a cam that lifted heavy hammers and let them fall in a steady rhythm, saving smiths tremendous effort. Metal was forged into rough shapes and gradually refined into tools, weapons, and armor. Vine armor, light, cooling, and well-suited to Dorne's heat, was mass-produced, and shields in the vine armor style became common. A blacksmith guild had formed in the quarter to organize training, set standards, and assess ranks. Following that model, Arthur had tasked Carl By with building guild halls for other trades. In addition to the central blacksmith guild, guilds for carpenters, stonemasons, sculptors, goldsmiths, tailors, and hunters had opened. The weapons, armor, tools, and handicrafts produced by these workshops supplied the surrounding areas and were also sent to a warehouse Arthur established in Starfall Port. Arthur's fleet, along with Bravosi captains who had signed agreements, came to stock up and sell the goods at various ports. As Arthur's party passed the noisy blacksmith quarter and entered the pasture lands, they saw orderly fields and large herds guided by shepherds and sheepdogs. Vickwood exhaled, impressed. Violet Canyon changes every day. They rode on until they arrived at a tall, spacious church. Jimmy Sunderland looked over the cluster of houses, the attached vegetable gardens, and the orchards, and sighed. The first time I came here with Alice the monk, there was nothing but grass and stone, and the red mountain on the horizon. Chapter 108, Subdue the Savages. Lord Arthur, Bishop Alice is inside. Two young monks opened the church doors and led the party in. Stone statues of the seven gods stood at the front of the nave, light streaming through half-open wooden windows to settle on the rows of benches and the long table beneath the icons. Bishop Alice rose as Arthur entered, dismissed the monks with a wave, and hurried forward to bow and shake Arthur's hand. Lord Arthur, my lord, welcome. How do you find the negotiation chamber? Arthur withdrew his hand and glanced around. Not bad. If the talks go well, I'll replace these wooden windows with glass panes. Alice's eyes brightened. Glass panes would be splendid. Arthur sat at one end of the table and motioned for Edric to take the seat beside him. Alice set two incense burners alight. The church slowly filled with the sweet smoke. Edric leaned closer. Cousin, what about those lords who went as hostages to the Red Mountain tribes? Will they be safe? Arthur gave a small, steady smile. The Red Mountain barbarians are fierce, but they respect strength. Your lives will be safe, at least your lives. To ensure the barbarians' leaders would attend, Arthur had exchanged captives. The barbarians present had brought their own people in return for an equal number and status of hostages held by Starfall City. Alice leaned in. What if they don't show, if this is a trick to get their people back? Arthur's eyes were cold and calm. If they refuse to come to the table, I'll send them to the chopping block. A quarter hour later, the church doors opened again. Arthur, the barbarian leaders are here. A young monk ushered in 5 tribal chieftains and Shigu, leader of the Xiang, also called the Stone Sheep, tribe. The chieftains took their seats and introduced themselves. Arthur learned the leader among them was Xiong Ni of the Stone Bear tribe, an old man dressed in a full bearskin, whiskers white, wearing a bear headdress. Shigu had warned Arthur that Xiong Ni, once a great hunter who had killed a bear with a spear in his youth, was now more cautious and thoughtful, the mind behind many of the Vulture King's plans. We sent our captives first to show our sincerity, Alice said. We come in person for the same reason, said the Crow tribe leader. Arthur folded his hands. Tell me what you want. Xiong Ni spoke bluntly. Stop enslaving our people. Return those taken in the Battle of the Highlands. Let them go back to the Red Mountain. Arthur listened without interrupting. Xiong Ni continued, We promise not to invade Starfall's lands again. We will return to trade as before. That's not enough, Stone Bear. Arthur shook his head. Let me tell you what I demand. I want the barbarian tribes of the Red Mountain to swear allegiance to me. The Crow tribe leader sprang to his feet. Free men do not bow to any lord. The other chieftains erupted in agreement. Tempers flared until Arthur indicated to Vickwood with a look. The young attendant understood, drew a parchment from his satchel, and spread it on the table. The room fell silent at the sight. The Crow chief glared at Shigu, his face dark, then sat again. The parchment was a map of the Red Mountain, its ridges, valleys, and the marked locations of each tribe. Arthur's voice cut through the tension. Leaders, over the past year and a half, you have repeatedly raided Violet Canyon and other settlements on the western bank of the Torrent River. You've noticed that with watchtowers and mountain forts in place, those raids have become far costlier and far more difficult. You rely on the Red Mountain itself, its high peaks, dense forests, and our ignorance of that territory. That advantage ends now. He tapped a line on the map. No place will be safe for hiding your movements. Xiongni's face did not change. We will move our tribes. Your map is useless to us. At once, the chieftains found their voices again. We'll fight where we know the ground. If you come into the Red Mountain, don't expect mercy. A sharp screech from above cut them off. A giant vulture sailed through the skylight and into the nave. The chieftains scrambled back as the bird alighted on the long table before Arthur. He reached out. The vulture lowered its head and pressed against his palm. Xiongni stared, then his jaw slackened. He, above all, understood what the bird meant. The Vulture King had used such birds to spot and signal targets. With that vulture in Arthur's hand, there would be no hiding, no secret encampments, no safe relocation. The other chiefs exchanged glances of dawning realization. Their bravado faltered. "Sit down," Arthur said. "Let us discuss terms." They returned to their places, faces as pale as if they had seen a ghost. The negotiations that followed were careful but far more cordial than expected. After an hour, they reached an accord. 1. Oath of allegiance. All barbarian tribes in the mid and lower Red Mountain on the Torrent River's west bank will swear fealty to Arthur and to Starfall City. 2. Tribal autonomy maintained. Tribes will remain intact under their own leaders. Tribes may substitute required taxes with military service or labor. 3. Strengthened commerce. Tribal leaders will not impede members who seek work in Starfall's territories. Barbarians employed there will receive the same wages and benefits as Dornish workers. Markets will be established in Violet Canyon where goods are exchanged without discrimination. 4. Freedom of belief. Arthur will not compel any tribe to abandon its beliefs, nor will tribal leaders coerce conversion among their people. 5. Lord's duty and succession. Arthur pledges to protect the Red Mountain tribes from harm. When a tribal leader dies, the heir must come to Starfall City to renew the oath and receive recognition from Arthur to legitimize their rule. Intertribal disputes will be settled through Arthur and Starfall City. Private raids and revenge attacks are forbidden. As the terms were read, color returned to the chiefs' faces. Apart from Xiongni, most could not read. After Xiongni signed, the others pressed their painted handprints to the parchment. At the close of the ceremony, Arthur assisted each of the 5 as they knelt to swear, then helped them to their feet. Bishop Alice escorted them out, whispering the 7 gods' blessings in their ears. Once the leaders had departed, Shigu, who had surrendered earliest, couldn't hide his curiosity. "Arthur, why give them such favorable terms?" Arthur turned to Edric. "Ed, why do you think I did this?" Edric considered briefly. "Cousin, you always say that when someone challenges you, you must answer firmly with iron and blood. But when they kneel, you must lift them up yourself. Otherwise, no one will believe surrender brings mercy." He pointed at the vulture. The moment they saw that bird, they had already knelt. Arthur's face softened with satisfaction. He reached to ruffle the page's hair, but the boy slipped away with a shy grimace. He looked at Shigu then, whose expression was steady. "We've been allies long enough for you to know I reward faithfulness." After their submission, the Stone Sheep tribe's special standing among the barbarians won't be disturbed. The captives will remain under your supervision. Chapter 109. Training the Savage Mountain Troops. After winning the submission and loyalty of the Red Mountain barbarians along the middle and lower Torrent River, Arthur discovered that 2 strategy cards had unlocked on his system panel. Southern barbarian invasion. For 7 days, the adaptability of the army you command in rugged terrain is enhanced, reducing stamina consumption when traversing mountains and hills. Lying in wait. For 7 days, the army you command is better concealed when setting ambushes, and morale receives a large boost after ambushing the enemy. The effects of these cards match the habits and strengths of the Red Mountain barbarians perfectly. Arthur felt a pleasant surprise. In command, this had always been his weak spot. With Southern Barbarian Invasion, Lying in Wait, and the Vulture high-altitude reconnaissance bonus, that gap was effectively filled. The two cards sparked an idea: train a standing mountain force out of the Red Mountain Barbarians. Barbarians already adapted to the terrain and skilled in ambushes, combined with his strategy bonuses and aerial reconnaissance, they would be unstoppable in the Red Mountain. Such a force would also solidify his control over the tribes. If any clan proved insubordinate, or if conflicts erupted between tribes or local lords, Arthur could deploy a disciplined force immediately. His orders would be carried out without delay. He summoned the builder Quentin and began planning a Mountain Legion training ground on a vacant plot near the mining area at Red Mountain. The Mountain Legion offered high pay and good treatment to all the Red Mountain barbarians and began recruiting. In under 2 weeks, more than 800 barbarians signed up, and another 100 Dornish from other parts of Starfall City came drawn by the reputation. Many of the applicants were former captives. Arthur had promised that those who made the mountain force would no longer have to survive on coarse rations and meager portions. After removing those who were injured, disabled, or otherwise unsuitable by age or gender, over 600 recruits remained, still more than Arthur wanted. His target was 100 regular soldiers and 100 reserves. Maintaining a large standing army that produced nothing would be expensive, and a compact, well-trained force of 100 men could crush a single rebellious tribe in the Red Mountain. To run the program, Arthur summoned Sir Bard and recruited Xiongni, leader of the Stone Bear tribe, to serve as instructors. With Black Mamba and Tau as the core backbone NCOs, they would assist in training and selection. A month of grueling drills weeded out the weak, the dim-witted, and the insubordinate, reducing the pool to just over 200. The training ground itself was still under construction, so Arthur called the instructors, backbone personnel, and Bishop Alice to Ironstone Fort, a small mountaintop outpost by the mines, for a meeting. Next, Arthur announced, we screen these 200 and divide them into regulars and reserves. Sir Bard asked, how do you plan to screen them, Arthur? By assessment, Arthur said. The top 100 scorers become regulars, the rest are reserves. Those in the reserves with the lowest scores will be dismissed. Regulars will receive 50% higher pay and better benefits than reserves, Arthur continued. Those dismissed will get severance equal to 1 month's pay. Sir Bard frowned. Won't that just keep shrinking the numbers? Many more are still applying, Arthur replied. During the assessment, if someone among the reserves shows real potential, we can promote from within to fill any gaps. Xiongni, no longer wearing his bear hide, but now in a Mountain Legion uniform, scoffed. Hundreds applying for a few spots? Isn't that too few? Arthur only nodded. Training non-productive soldiers was costly. Each elimination was an expense. The elimination rule and ranking system were meant to encourage healthy competition within the Legion, not simply to cut numbers. Xiongni then asked, what will the assessment include? Arthur swept his gaze across the group. That's why I called this meeting. I want this army to be loyal to its commanders, to possess strong combat power, stubborn fighting will, and a broad set of practical skills. Discuss what should be tested. They exchanged looks before Sir Bard spoke first. Swordsmanship, spearwork, archery, horsemanship, and formation drills. Bishop Alice added, faith in the 7 gods, literacy, and obedience to orders. Xiongni offered, mountain march speed, hunting ability, survival in harsh conditions, and courage. Arthur listened as they threw out ideas. He had Vic 5 and Vic 6 record everything. Combining their suggestions with military practices from his previous life, he formulated the initial assessment plan: running laps, cross-country, swordsmanship, and internal affairs organization, each with a maximum of 100 points. Formation, 10-man squad maneuvering, maximum 100 points. Archery, maximum 50 points. Faith in the Seven Gods and literacy, bonus items, each worth plus 10 points. He called everyone together again. There will be an assessment now, another at the end of the year, and then one every 6 months, Arthur said. We will change and add content as training progresses and needs evolve. Bishop Alice winced. Arthur, is only 10 points for faith in the Seven Gods enough? Even that internal affairs part is 100 points. Before Arthur could answer, Xiangni cut in. We're assessing soldiers, not monks. Remove the bonus points. Faith and literacy won't kill an enemy. Bishop Alice argued, the warrior among the seven can bless soldiers going into battle. Literacy helps them understand commands and improves their combat skill. Sir Bard, for his part, was puzzled that horsemanship and lancing didn't feature prominently. Arthur answered calmly, these are the initial items, the essentials. We'll adapt and add skills like horsemanship and lance drills later, depending on needs. Seeing no further objections, Arthur rapped the table. All right, proceed. Arthur personally hoped the Seven Gods' faith would spread among the barbarians. It would strengthen ties between the Dornish and the mountain clans. But he knew faith could not be forced, only grown gradually through example and influence. The Mountain Legion station was taking shape. Sturdy stone barracks lined the training ground, with ramparts and practice fields still being built. The barracks were divided into 3 sections, for reserves, regulars, and officers, with each level of accommodation better than the last. The gradation served both as a reward and as a tangible goal for soldiers to aspire to. In the center stood the quartermaster's office, under construction, with supply warehouses below for food and material. Around the quartermaster's area were several blacksmith shops handling weapons repair and specific modifications. With Arthur's command, the Mountain Legion began its first assessment on the new drill ground. He watched the men as they stood at attention, marched in step, folded their bedding with care, and ran laps with fierce enthusiasm. A small, involuntary smile crept across Arthur's face. The scene felt familiarly right, discipline taking root where once there had been only chaos. Chapter 110, Taoyuan 2.0. After 3 days of finishing the first assessment and dividing the regular army from the standing army, Arthur assigned Sir Bard and a commander promoted from the Black Mamba swordsman to take over the subsequent training. Then he set off for his other holding, Lighthouse Keep. A year earlier, Arthur had named Ledger Pete as administrator and acting lord of Lighthouse Keep to manage the territory while he attended to matters at Starpost. He had also spent 4 days in the orchard on Lighthouse Keep's lands, where lemon and fig trees had been planted, using the item card, Peach Garden Vow, 4 times, and having the fruit farmers sow the peach pits he'd saved after eating peaches. That was how the new peach garden had been established. Peach Garden Vow guarantees the survival of peach trees within a specified half-league and accelerates their growth. The harsher the environment, the slower the trees grow. A year later, returning to the peach garden outside Lighthouse Keep, Arthur saw row upon row of trees as far as the eye could reach. Large, neatly planted areas full of carefully pruned peach trees. In the heat of dawn, the first batch had grown quickly. They had all flowered and borne fruit. Apiaries were scattered among the trees. Beehives tended by beekeepers that produced honey and beeswax, and by pollination made the whole orchard far more productive. Besides flavoring, honey can be mixed with water and fermented into mead, Pete said as he led Arthur and his retinue through the garden. Beeswax can be used for candles, sealing wax, writing tablets, and molds. Arthur took a jar of freshly drawn honey from a beekeeper. The honey was a pale amber. When he tasted it, there was the sweetness of honey and a faint perfume of peach blossom. He handed the jar to Edric, who had been watching eagerly. Children should eat fewer sweets. Here, take it and share, Arthur said. I'm not a child, Edric protested, but he ran off to play with some of the other children from the peach garden. Arthur motioned for Vicwood and Vic Six to follow and stopped paying attention to Edric. He smacked his lips, savoring the lingering taste of honey. And what about a mead? Pete pointed ahead. Arthur, come with me. The winery's right at the far edge of the peach garden. Arthur rarely came to Lighthouse Keep. He He spent most of his time at Starpost and had left the garden's planning and construction to Pete. After 10 minutes, they emerged from the grove and came to the winery complex. More than 20 stone buildings. Even standing outside, Arthur could smell peaches and other fruits. Pete gestured as he explained the layout. These are the brewing rooms, where ingredients are mixed, boiled, and set to ferment. That's the well house. The brewmaster insists on a clean water source. Over there is the ingredient warehouse, and this is the cellar. Arthur went down into the underground cellar. Cool and dry, it branched into passages with barrels stacked on shelves carved into the walls. Wines aged here, developing their flavors and qualities. Then they went to the main tasting hall, where guests and merchants could sample wines and negotiate purchases. Arthur, these are the 3 main wines from the winery: summer red, peach wine, and amber peach wine. The brewmaster sent servants in with 3 large jugs. Summer red is 1 silver stag a pot, peach wine 3 silver stags a pot, and amber peach wine 10 silver stags a pot, the brewmaster said. Arthur tasted them in turn. The summer red had a faint peach sweetness compared to the summer red he'd been drinking in Dorne, but was otherwise familiar. The peach wine was smoother than the peach wine he'd once brewed at Winterfell, easy on the palate, no dryness, leaving a lingering floral fruity perfume on the lips and teeth. The brewmaster clearly knew his craft. The amber peach wine, the most expensive of the 3, was a blend of honey, water, peaches, and other fruits. The brewmaster boasted, "This amber peach wine is my answer to the red wine family's golden wine from Old Town." Arthur pursed his lips. He'd drunk Old Town golden wine at the Sea King's palace. Its reputation was legendary across the narrow sea. Skeptical but curious, Arthur had a servant pour a glass. The wine's amber color was deep and textured. As the glass was brought to his nose, a rich bouquet rose up. He sipped. The flavor was mellow and sweet, layered with the aroma of multiple fruits. He set the glass down and allowed himself a smile. Different from Old Town Golden, but impressive. "Not bad," he said simply. He sampled 7 or 8 other varieties the brewmaster produced. None surpassed the amber peach wine, but each had its own character: spicy, refreshing, silky, sweet on the finish, or slightly bitter. Paired with biscuits and snacks, Arthur enjoyed the tasting more than he had expected. When they left the winery, Arthur's face was flushed from the tasting. Slightly tipsy, he turned to Pete and issued instructions. "You must keep this brewmaster at Lighthouse Keep forever, and the brewing process for the amber peach wine must be kept strictly confidential." "I've treated him well," Pete said. "A long-term contract, proper housing. His wife and children are settled here. The winery workers are local liegemen I recruited." Arthur nodded. The amber peach wine's unique character depended largely on its key raw materials: peaches and honey from the peach garden. Control the ingredients, and you control the wine. But keeping a talented brewmaster and preventing the process from leaking were essential measures to deepen their advantage. Arthur saw the wine's potential. The red wines in Old Town sustained their great fleet by selling golden wine and other quality vintages. A similar product could buy influence and power. Back in the main building of Lighthouse Keep, Arthur and Pete discussed distribution. "Peach wine and amber peach wine aren't known in Dorne yet," Pete said. "They don't have much reputation, and the prices aren't for ordinary folk. At first, I expect most of it will be kept for our fleet and the captains from Bravos, then sold elsewhere." "It's true that good wine sells itself, but we need to open the market," Arthur replied. "First, let's promote it in Starfall City and among our vassal lords and nobles. Send this batch to Starfall. Isn't Edric's 6th naming day coming up? We can hold a banquet in Starfall and use it to promote the wine. Also, contact the traveling merchants from Starpost. Sell them some at a low price so they can spread it to other lords in Dorne." They were finalizing logistical details when a knock came at the door. Pete frowned. "I told everyone not to disturb me when I'm meeting with Lord Arthur." A slightly breathless, childlike voice called from the other side. "Arthur, Maester says there's an urgent matter and he needs to see you. Come in." The Maester entered, clutching a letter and gasping for breath. "Arthur, an urgent summons from Starfall City." Arthur's brow tightened. His eyes flashed with a sudden excitement. A new vulture king in the Red Mountain? Trouble from the barbarian tribes? Brightspear stirring mischief again. With the forces Starfall City had built up and the improved weapons and gear they now possessed, any of those possibilities could mean they finally had a real fight on their hands. Chapter 111. Plans can't keep up with changes. Arthur broke the maester's wax seal, scanned the letter, and let out a small, rueful huff. Prince Doran is holding a tourney at Sunspear to celebrate the 20th name day of his heir, Princess Ariane Martell. He's invited vassals and knights across Dorne. My aunt and Master Oswell want me to represent Starfall City, he continued, and to take Ed with me to Sunspear to compete in the tourney. Pete's eyes flashed. Arthur, that changes everything. Arthur caught his meaning immediately. The Sunspear tourney and feast would be the perfect stage to make their peach wine and amber peach wine known throughout Dorne. The Maester warned them, it will take nearly a month to travel from Starfall City to Sunspear by land on horseback, barring sandstorms or other delays. You'll need to get ready to leave as soon as possible if you want to make the tourney, Pete said. Then prepare the carriages at once, Arthur nodded. He turned to Pete. Bring every barrel of peach wine and amber peach wine from the first batch. Maester, send Jimmy to call Ed back from the peach garden. We'll depart after lunch. Pete moved with the kind of efficiency Arthur had come to expect. By noon, the caravan was organized, 2 experienced Dornish guides hired, and more than a dozen carriages loaded with barrels, each covered with tarpaulins to keep out the sun. Jimmy Sunderland was ecstatic at the news of Sunspear, and soon took on the role of troubadour, regaling Edric and the others with endless tales of legendary knights. When they began to speak of the Dawn Sword, Arthur's memory sharpened. Master Oswell's 5 requirements for becoming the Dawn Sword. He had met most, but one remained. He must be made a knight by a revered and prestigious knight of Dorne. If he could also make their peach wines renowned, all the better. And perhaps, if he won the mounted combat at the tourney, he could petition Prince Doran. If he was fortunate, the Red Viper, Oberyn Martell, might even knight him. They reached Starpost in the dead of night. The company from Starfall had arrived earlier, led by Sir Barton. At breakfast in the main hall the next morning, Sir Barton took a long draught of amber peach wine and blinked in surprise. Arthur, he said, I didn't think you could get peach trees to thrive in the heat of Dorne. And you've made such fine wine from them. Honestly, it's not much worse than the golden wine of Old Town. Administrator Fat Kellen sipped and savored the flavor, clearly astonished. He'd heard rumors a year ago about peaches being planted at Lighthouse Keep and had been skeptical. Lord Arthur, he blurted, do you have some sort of magic? You always manage what others can't. Arthur smiled. No magic, just hard work. When Sir Barton learned a jug of amber peach wine would sell for 10 silver stags, he only poured more freely, cup after cup disappearing with plain bread and olives. Arthur picked at purple olives and watched him drink, then asked casually, Is the old instructor going to Sunspear? Sir Barton set the jug down reluctantly. My father says he's too old to go and compete with the young men. He'll stay behind. Arthur then went around the table for opinions on the wines and received encouraging feedback. Satisfied, they broke camp after breakfast and set out on the planned route, first to Highgarden, then east through Prince's Pass, over the gravel road to the Torrent River, and following the Greenblood to Sunspear. Fat Kellen and the guides talked over the best roads and stops. Arthur preferred the land route. Sea travel might be predictable and faster at times, but he liked the feel of solid ground beneath his feet, the wind across his face when riding, the changing scenery, and the people they met along the way. On rest stops, he often took Swiftwing, Edric, and a couple of attendants into the nearby woods for falconry and hunting. Swiftwing was a massive bald eagle. Arthur had trained for more than a year. Their bond had become intimate enough that Arthur could step into the bird's mind and see what it saw. When they found a single target in the open, Swiftwing's dive could take it down. For multiple targets, Arthur used the Kirin bow, firing at positions the eagle scouted from above. Their hunts were almost always successful, and each excursion made Arthur's control of Swiftwing smoother and easier. As they rode through the Torrent River lands, more landed knights heading for Sunspear joined them, along with a number of vassals. Arthur noticed familiar faces. Sir Vane of Brightspear, who had once answered the call to cover for the old instructor at the 4-story watchtower, and Sir Williams, who had commanded the right flank in battles and been granted land near Knight's Rest Keep. With so many knights in attendance, the march went smoothly, sand, wind, and sun aside, without any real trouble. Even a few camel caravans asked to fall in behind them for protection in exchange for payment. After Fat Kellen confirmed they were merchants and not scouts for bandits, Arthur agreed. One morning, as they took the gravel road toward the Torrent River, Sir Vane cantered up from the front. "Lord Arthur, there's a large encampment just off the road ahead." "From the banners, those are the eagle banners of House Fowler," he added. House Fowler held Prince's Pass and kept Skyreach City. Arthur remembered Miss Nymeria borrowing troops from them in the past to settle a dispute with the Brayman family. "We must not be moving slowly," Arthur murmured, adjusting the silk scarf over his face. "We've caught up to the Fowler contingent heading to Sunspear." "That would make sense," Sir Vane said. Sir Bard rode on ahead with the standard-bearer to negotiate. Fat Kellen glanced at the shortening day. "It's getting late. We should set up camp near them." Arthur nodded. The plan for the road to Sunspear had changed in ways he had expected and in ways he hadn't, but there was no time to worry about contingencies now. They rode on to make camp, the tarps over the barrels flapping softly in the evening breeze. Chapter 112, Meet Miss Nymeria Again. When the Starfall City contingent put up their tents and lit the campfire, Sir Barton returned from House Fowler's encampment. He removed his helmet and wiped sweat from his brow. "Their leader is Lord Franklin Fowler, the Earl of Skyreach City," he reported. "I spoke with Lord Mason, Skyreach's drillmaster. I suggested we travel together down the road to Sunspear, and he agreed after consulting the Earl." Arthur nodded. "It's safer if we travel together and watch each other's backs." He looked at Fat Kellen, the administrator at his side. "Have the attendants bring a barrel of peach wine and a barrel of amber peach wine to Lord Franklin as a gift." Kellen bowed and left the tent. Sir Barton picked up a cup of wine from the table and took a swig. "In the Fowler camp, I saw Prince Oberyn's illegitimate daughter, Miss Nymeria," he added. "Miss Nymeria?" Arthur pictured her instantly. The dozens of sharp weapons she carried, her cool composure when bargaining with Sir Irvin of Brightspear. Maybe she could be an opening to find the Red Viper. He had just finished feeding Swiftwing, the vulture he'd named, and was thinking about seeking her out when Fat Kellen returned and said, "Lord Arthur, do you know why House Fowler has been staying here?" Arthur glanced toward the tent flap. The sun was dipping low. "Isn't it getting late?" "No, they've been here 3 days," Kellen said, shaking his head. "They found a wild herd of sand horses nearby. One of them is entirely purple, tall, magnificent, and runs like the wind. They've been trying to catch it." Sir Barton, lounging on a roll, sat up at the mention of a fine horse. "Lord Mason didn't tell me that. What's the situation now?" Kellen explained. "They haven't caught it. That horse is hot-tempered and very clever. If many riders chase it, it bolts. Ordinary sand war horses can't keep up. If one person approaches it alone, it won't flee but will attack. It's already injured several knights who tried to tame it by themselves." "Interesting," Arthur said, intrigued. "I'd like to see it." "Kellen, ask House Fowler if they'll try to catch it again tomorrow. I want to see it," Arthur said. Edric gathered the scraps Swiftwing had left and tossed them to the crows in their cage. "Me too," he said. Sir Barton grinned. "If they don't go, we will. Even if we can't subdue the purple horse, just seeing it will be worth it." That evening Arthur, itching with anticipation, slipped into Swiftwing's perspective and found the herd near an oasis a short distance east of camp. There it stood, among the low, slender-necked sand horses, an unmistakable purple horse. It towered over its companions, long-limbed and well-proportioned, its coat a shimmering purple with a purplish-red sheen. Watching it fill the plain with a blend of grace and power, Arthur felt his chest tighten. It rivaled Zephyr for magnificence. Early the next morning, Arthur led over 20 riders to the oasis. Clearly, everyone wanted a look. House Fowler, arriving first with about a dozen riders, was already there. Their leader wasn't Earl Franklin, but Miss Nymeria. "Lords, are you here for that purple horse?" she asked the Starfall Knights with evident amusement, her eyes finally settling on Arthur. "Be warned, that horse is fierce." Arthur looked at the herd. The dust from their arrival had scattered most of the horses, but the purple one remained by the water, head raised defiantly. "Who doesn't like a spirited horse?" he said. "You came first, so you have priority." After a brief consultation, a tall knight from House Fowler slung a coil of rope and spurred his sand warhorse toward the purple mare. He was an experienced rider and looked confident. The purple horse, confronted by a single rider, didn't flee, it charged him. Its mane and tail, the same deep color as its coat, flowed like banners in the wind. Watching from a distance, Arthur couldn't help but admire. Its coat shines like a purple swallow in flight. "You seem to know about horses." Miss Nymeria rode closer. Arthur took her in. She had become more striking over the year. Dark eyes, high cheekbones, full lips, and a long straight braid tied with red gold cord. "I'm not blind," he replied. "Then don't just stare, watch properly," she said. Arthur fixed his gaze. "I'm watching." The tall knight cast his rope in a wide arc toward the horse's neck, but it slipped past. The horse turned sharply. The rope only brushed its flank. The rider pursued, and the two danced across the sand, man and horse against beast, each lunge met by a nimble evasion. 7 times they clashed. The knight's attempt barely missed every time. The purple horse moved with stunning speed and agility, sand flying beneath pounding hooves. "That horse is toying with Lord Cleary," Miss Nymeria remarked. "Evidently," Arthur agreed. Then everything changed. The purple horse charged, then made a sudden right turn, evading the rope. It dug its forehooves into the sand, pivoted, and lashed out with its powerful hind legs. The kick caught Lord Cleary in the leg as he clung to his mount. Cleary's sand warhorse reared and then collapsed headfirst. Arthur sucked in air. The purple horse had used a countermove that stunned him, something like the rabbit eagle. Several House Fowler riders rushed to lift Lord Cleary free from under his fallen horse. The purple horse held back at a cautious distance, watching calmly, neither interfering nor fleeing. "Anyone else want to try?" Arthur asked. Silence fell among the Fowler knights. Finally, Lord Mason, Skyreach's drillmaster, spoke. "Lord Cleary is our best at horsemanship and horse catching. If he failed, House Fowler won't try to take it." "Then it's our turn." Arthur looked back at his companions. "Anyone want to attempt it?" Sir Williams, who had commanded the right flank with valor in earlier engagements, suggested tactically, "Arthur, a multi-rider encirclement would be safer." Sir Barton, glancing at the injured Cleary being carried away, agreed. "Trying to catch it alone is too risky. We should surround it." But Lord Mason shook his head. "We tried surrounding it earlier. It's useless, too fast, too agile. It never gives us a chance." Arthur stripped off his headscarf. "Let me try. I can do it on my own." Miss Nymeria regarded him quietly. "You want to capture it?" Arthur peeled off his outer garment and answered with a cool smile. "I don't want to capture it. I want to tame it." Chapter 113, Horse Taming. The morning sun hit Arthur's bare torso, turning his strong, sculpted frame into a living statue of muscle and tension. "Rope," he called. He had activated naked body and stretched, then waved back. Edric handed him the rope. Arthur took it, squeezed Zephyr's flank, and the horse beneath him surged forward toward the purple stallion. The purple horse snorted and charged as before, seeing only one rider coming at it. Arthur settled his breathing, one hand on Zephyr's reins, the other holding the rope, eyes locked on the purple horse. As they closed, the stallion tried the same sideways feint, the rabbit hawk trick it had used earlier. Prepared this time, Arthur tugged Zephyr's flank and yanked the reins. Zephyr reared, stopping its forward momentum. The purple horse's kick found only empty air. Arthur's rope flew in a perfect arc and caught the purple horse's hind leg before it could pull free. The animal neighed in fury and reared, raising the snared leg high and thrashing to break the rope. Arthur tightened his grip and dismounted, hauling with both hands until the horse stumbled and nearly fell. As it scrambled back up, Arthur closed in and, anticipating another kick, used his flash ability to dodge in an impossible, razor-thin arc and vaulted onto its back. He wrapped his legs around the stallion's girth and gripped its mane with both hands. What followed was 20 brutal minutes of stamina, strength, and will, man against beast. The purple horse ran and bucked and threw its weight every which way. Arthur was almost dislodged more than once, his back aching from every jolt. He tore handfuls of mane from the horse as he clung on, feeling the raw wildness beneath him, rage, fear, and a refusal to be tamed. Slowly, the animal's struggles began to ebb. Its breaths came ragged and loud. Sweat and blood slicked its neck. Finally, it stood still, chest heaving, the ferocity in its eyes dimming. Arthur laughed aloud, a deep, victorious sound. After more than half an hour of wrestling, the distant crowd had crowded in. People from both camps, those who hadn't cared at first and those who had, clustered around to watch. "Thank the gods, Arthur. Are you hurt?" someone cried. "Lord Arthur without his shirt. He's the warrior among the 7 gods," another exclaimed. "It's unbelievable someone actually broke that purple beast," murmured a third, eyes wide. The Starfall men worried about his condition. The squires who had trained under his naked body and assault skills felt it was just par for the course. Many from Skyreach found the whole thing impossible to believe. This stallion had wounded 5 skilled riders in 3 days. Miss Nymeria parted the House Fowler crowd and rode out. She appraised the man before her. Sweat and blood streaked across his bare chest, tousled black curls sticking up, his violet eyes bright and fierce. She only glanced for a moment, then looked away. Those purple eyes were dangerously captivating. "I always keep my word," Arthur said. Jimmy looped a rope around the purple horse's neck, and Arthur dismounted. "That's settled. Can we break camp and head for Sunspare now?" Lord Mason nodded. "As you wish." With the purple horse tamed, there was no reason to linger. After a quick tidy, they set off for Sunspare along the gravel road. "Can I ride it?" Miss Nymeria asked with interest as Arthur led the horse by the rope. "It had no saddle. It'll hurt you," Arthur replied from Zephyr's back. "It's still wild. No stable hand or farrier can get near it. It only listens when I'm close. And without a saddle, you could easily fall." "Then let me lead it," she countered, tilting her head. "Or give me a ride." Arthur suspected she wanted to ride for the thrill, and because if anything happened to her while she was with him, his plan to have the Red Viper knight him would be ruined. He refused more out of caution than anything else. "You're poking me," he complained when the dozen daggers strapped to her person shifted and jabbed his sore back as the purple horse trotted. From behind him, Miss Nymeria's voice was amused. "Then why not sit in front? That would make it harder to control the horse." Arthur shifted forward a little to find a better position. Without a saddle, there was space to move, but it was still precarious. "If you're in front, I might accidentally poke you." He thought of her father, of the sand snake reputation, of the many blades pressed against him. Better she stay behind. "You're far away," she teased. "Let me hold on." Arthur nearly lost his balance at her reaching hand and had to clamp his legs tighter. "Keep your hands still. This is dangerous." "The fewer weapons I have, the more dangerous," she said lazily. "I don't want to fall. So let me sit in front." Arthur had no choice. He eased back and let her hold on. After a while, the discomfort in his back became unbearable, and he dismounted to walk the purple horse for a while. Miss Nymeria watched Snow, one of the men leading the other horses, refused to let her sit in front. Snow was from the north, she thought. The cold up there had frozen their affections long ago. Perhaps his reserve was just northern reserve. With that, she rode back to her own mount. By dusk, the party reached an oasis with a village and an inn. In a small room, Fat Kellen told Arthur, "From here, it's just 1 day to the River of Misfortune." "I understand. Make sure everyone rests early," Arthur replied. He was exhausted. After giving the squires orders to care for the horses and hawks, he skipped dinner and went straight to bed. Before sleep took him, he forced himself awake to check the system panel. As he suspected, a new equipment card had unlocked. Purple, optimized 1 horse. Temperamental and highly aggressive. Possesses excellent explosive power and speed, with increased speed during charges and pursuits. A fitting reward, he thought, and sighed before letting sleep take him. In the dark of his dreams, he thought he heard a door open, or maybe he imagined it. "Don't make a sound. It's me," a very familiar voice whispered in the room. Chapter 114, Pure Relationship, 2-in-1. The fewer sharp weapons he carried, the more dangerous it felt. In one night, Arthur had come to understand the other meaning behind Nymeria's words. "How do you feel?" he asked softly, watching her face. She opened her eyes slowly. Her long lashes fluttered in the morning light. Arthur leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Nymeria could no longer pretend to sleep. She stretched like a cat, languid and charming. Her arms arched over her head, black hair fanned across the pillow, catching the pale sun. "You should be asking me that," she said, a playful curve to her lips. Arthur swung his feet to the floor and padded to the table to pour a glass of wine. The amber liquid caught the light as he turned and leaned against the table, watching her with a complicated look on his face. "What kind of relationship will we have going forward?" "Why would you ask that?" Nymeria rolled onto her side, propping her head with one hand while the other toyed with the sheet. A faint confusion flitted across her face and then softened into a chuckle, as if she'd thought of something amusing. "Right, your name is Snow, not Sand. Dornish customs are different from the North's. We do not fuss over whether a child is born within marriage or is the offspring kept with a mistress. Many lords and even countesses keep lovers. Between lovers, there is only pure love and desire. No questions of succession, no marriage alliances, no other messy obligations. Men sleep with men, women with women. The Septons try to teach us virtue, but with little success." She sat up, leaning against the headboard, a teasing smile on her lips. "We can give each other pleasure." She licked her lips, and there was a mischievous glint in her eyes. "I want you to be one of my lovers." "One of?" Arthur raised an eyebrow. He remembered her mention of the Fowler twins from Skyreach. Dornish passion and looseness of custom were well known. She had spoken truth. He stayed silent, letting her continue. "If you're willing to duel them for me," she added, smiling wider and with unmistakable provocation in her eyes, "I'll be very happy to remove the one of." "Them." Arthur's brow tightened at her choice of pronoun. "They're women? They're women?" "Jane and Jenelyn Fowler," Nymeria said as she dressed with practiced grace, fingers deftly tying her garments. "We grew up together in the water gardens, splashing in the pools. If old Lord Franklin hadn't been so stubborn and refused to let them come to Sunspear with me, you would have met them already." "I don't duel women," Arthur said. "There's no honor in winning or losing." Nymeria laughed and snatched the wine glass from his hand with the same quickness he'd seen the night before. "They will, for me, take on men in duels, honor be damned." She tipped the wine and brightened. "This wine?" She used her thumb to dab the rim and suck the drop from her lips. "It's wonderful, flavors I've never had." "There's another cup here." Arthur poured her another glass. "It's called Amber Leap. It's made in my lands. One reason I brought a retinue to Sunspear is to spread the word of it." "One of?" Nymeria's eyebrow rose. "What is the other purpose?" "I want your father, Prince Oberyn, to knight me." The cups touched, and Arthur spoke plainly. "Help me, and I'll be happy to remove the one of." Nymeria's brow tightened briefly. Displeasure shadowed her voice. "You came to me for that?" "My lady, you came to my room," Arthur corrected gently, turning her hand when it reached for him. "All right, I take it back." He eased her struggling fingers into his grasp. "I promise there will be no mess, only pure desire and pleasure." She snorted softly and withdrew her hand, displeasure still flickering across her face, even as her lips tipped into a small smile. "As long as you understand." Arthur found her pouting delightful. He slid an arm around her slender waist and lowered his head to kiss her. Her mouth was soft and warm, tasting faintly of wine, intoxicating. An hour later, they rode out again. The Dornish sun beat down on the desert. Golden sand shimmered and distant peaks hovered in heat haze. Arthur sat his horse purple, feeling the animal's strong muscles beneath him. He glanced back at Nymeria on her golden-red sand steed, composed, black hair drifting in the wind. At the first camp to pass the time, Arthur brought out Swiftwing, the vulture he had trained. Nymeria inspected the great bird perched on his gloved arm. "No wonder they call you the Vulture King," she said. "Horses, birds. Arthur, is there anything you can't tame?" "Perhaps dragons, if any still live," he replied dryly. "Are you sure it won't scratch me?" she asked, unease in her voice. Swiftwing's size and hooked talons were intimidating. Nymeria had raised birds of prey at Skyreach and known many kinds of eagles, but nothing this large. "I've trained him 1.5 years," Arthur said, arm sheathed in thick falconry leather. "He's not like Purple." He coaxed the vulture down and drew it close. "Look, very obedient. He won't harm anyone without my command. You can touch his head." Perhaps his movement came too quickly. Swiftwing half spread his wings to balance, and the gust from his feathers made several of Nymeria's attendants step back. One tumbled to the planks, but Nymeria met the bird without fear, leaning in. It's huge. Will it let me? Edric stepped forward, stroked Swiftwing, and nodded. As long as it's with someone he knows, my cousin or those who feed him, he's harmless. When my cousin is busy, Vic would, Vic 6, and I feed him. After touching the bird's feathers, Nymeria smiled. Edric, you are brave, just like your cousin. Over the days on the road, Arthur and Nymeria grew closer. By daylight, they hunted, rode, and swapped stories of breaking horses and training birds. At night, they traded memories and confidences, and one evening, after Arthur read aloud from Captain Lyce's travelogue, conversation had slid into something more intimate. By the time they neared Sunspear, they did not speak of everything, but they knew one another in ways that mattered. It was also during this journey that Arthur successfully used the equipment card Purple on his horse Purple, binding it as an asset. He could now ride the 9+1 horse when pursuing, and the +1 horse Zephyr when fleeing. They stopped in Plankytown, a trading settlement at the mouth of the Greenblood. Ships tied to planks and barges made streets. The town swayed on water. To Arthur, it was a poorer, salt-stiff version of Bravos, wooden walkways, shanties, and merchants from distant ports. They rested a day and pressed on up the Greenblood after word reached them that the Sunspear tourney would begin in 7 days. A cavalry scout reported a banner sighting. Arthur, the group ahead flies Euronwood and Martell colors. It looks like Lord Anders Euronwood with his foster son, my cousin Quentin Martell, Nymeria said. Shall we go say hello? Arthur asked. On the road, noble parties often exchanged courtesies. Sometimes they even halted to converse. Nymeria shook her head. Lord Anders will not look kindly on me. My father killed his father in a duel. Dornish politics were full of fierce lesser houses. In Dorne, House Euronwood had once been the most unruly of the vassals, hence the old enmity. Rumor had it that when Oberyn was a boy, he'd been discovered with Lord Euronwood's mistress. A duel followed. Though blood was drawn and honor preserved by agreement, Lord Euronwood later died of a festering wound. People whispered that Oberyn's blade had been poisoned. His nickname, the Red Viper, stuck after that. To appease Euronwood's anger, Prince Doran sent his eldest son to be fostered at Euronwood, another stitch in that long-woven feud. So is that why you keep company with the Fowler twins? Arthur teased. You said lovers meant no messy affairs, only pure desire. Before Dorne's unification, House Fowler had sided with the Martells against the old Euronwoods. The Fowlers and Euronwoods controlled the 2 passes into Dorne, the Prince's Pass and the Stoneway, and both were powerful callers of men. Nymeria rolled her eyes. You and your jokes. You don't understand humor at all. At that moment, Lord Franklin Fowler rode up. The man showed little of himself in public. Graying at the temples, hawk-eyed, broad-shouldered with long arms, he was known as the Old Vulture King. Lord Franklin, is something wrong? Arthur greeted. Franklin was blunt. House Fowler will not approach Euronwood. If the Dane family wishes, they may make their own peace. We have no intention. Arthur smiled. We've ridden together this far. We'll advance and retreat as one. Franklin nodded at that, then frowned. You sent troops before to mediate our quarrel with House Brightspear. That was Nymeria, Arthur said, remembering how she had bluffed Sir Irvin by claiming the Fowler host was already marching. She resolved it before you mobilized. Arthur turned to her. When he had been at the Brightspear camp, she had threatened Sir Irvin with the Fowler army. Franklin's expression softened at that, and he took his leave. Watching him go, Arthur thought of the Fowler words, "Let me soar," and felt an odd affinity for the straightforward lord. Nymeria caught his look and, with a cautionary tone, reminded him, "Don't forget you still have a grudge with House Brightspear. Be careful in the tourney." They should be careful, Arthur shrugged, but the warning tightened his awareness. People are not like horses and eagles, Nymeria said. Tricks and foul play are common, before and during the tourney. Knights may swear oaths to protect women, the weak and the innocent, she added, voice hardening, but sometimes what they do is worse than beasts. Arthur understood what she meant. The cruel fate of Ilya Martell and her children, after King's Landing fell, suffered at the hands of 2 knights, was a stain he had not forgotten. He would take care. After they passed through a grove of silverberry trees, the view opened up, and Arthur finally saw the destination of their journey. the Martell family's ancestral castle and the capital of Dorne, Sunspear. Sunspear sat on the eastern tip of a sandstone peninsula with the sea on three sides. To its west lay the Shadow City, clinging to the shadow of Sunspear's long serpentine walls. Mud brick houses stayed cool under the hot Dornish sun. Mud brick shops and windowless hovels huddled against the base of the wall. Further west, inns, stables, taverns, and brothels crowded together, some surrounded by their own walls. New houses pressed up against their neighbors, and year after year, Shadow City had spread until it looked like a strange, dirty little town. The narrow lanes were a maze. Before they reached the walls, a troop of cavalry galloped up, banners flicking in the wind with the sun and spear of House Martell. "They're the guards of Sunspear," Miss Nymeria murmured, a smile brightening her eyes. The troop drew up, and a tall knight rode forward to meet them. He wore bronze-plated armor. The face beneath his helm was stern, cold. He reined his horse, swept his gaze over the party, and gave a brief nod. "Miss Nymeria, my lords, welcome to Sunspear," he said in a low, steady voice. "Prince Doran has been expecting you." "Sir Daemon Sand?" Miss Nymeria's smile widened. "It's been too long. We will enter the city now." So this was Sir Daemon Sand. Arthur appraised the tall, handsome knight. On the way, he had coaxed a few facts from Miss Nymeria. Daemon Sand was Oberyn's bastard from God's Grace, once his squire and later knighted by him. He had been the hero of a Sunspear tourney, the first love of Princess Arianne Martell, so the stories went, and the man who had taken her maidenhead. Handsome, accomplished, and popular with women, none of it fit Arthur's narrow ideas of what bastards were supposed to be. Bastards he'd known were blacksmiths, recruits for the Night's Watch, sleazy lowlives, or worse. This Daemon looked nothing like the lot. Then it clicked. His name was Daemon. Of course. Sir Daemon greeted them, gave the cavalry a signal, and led them toward the city. Shadow City's three winding walls had gates placed to give a direct line into Sunspear. They avoided miles of alleys and the labyrinthine lanes. Miss Nymeria chatted cheerfully all the way, pointing out sights, foods, and snippets of history. Arthur had been to great trading cities, Braavos, Pentos, others in his previous life, and most of it left him indifferent. Edric, on his first long journey, drank in everything. Only when they entered the inner city did Miss Nymeria point out two tall towers, which finally caught Arthur's attention. "The Spear Tower is for the Martell's spear," she said. "The shorter Sun Tower beside it stands for the Rhoynar's sun." At the word sun, Arthur looked where she indicated. The Spear Tower rose slender and proud, 150 feet of stone capped by a gilded iron spike that added another 30 feet. The Sun Tower was shorter, but still the second tallest building in the inner city, topped with a golden dome and leaded glass. Arthur watched Edric trying to measure the Spear Tower with his hand. "How does the Spear Tower compare to the White Sword Tower in Starfall?" he asked. Edric shrugged. "I don't know. I don't think there's much difference." Arthur smirked. "If anyone asks, tell them the White Sword Tower is shorter than the Spear Tower." Edric solemnly folded himself into the pretense. "We'll keep it in our hearts that the White Sword Tower is tallest." Miss Nymeria rolled her eyes at the pair. "How could House Dane let this child be your squire? Look how you're teaching him." Arthur feigned offense. "What do you know? I'm teaching Edric how a true man must bend and stretch in life." She shot him a mock scowl. "The Martell words are unbent, unbowed, unbroken, and you're teaching him to bend and stretch. If my father heard that, do you think he'd knight you?" Arthur blinked. "Ed, I was joking. Pretend you didn't hear." Edric, catching his cue, patted his chest and turned wide-eyed to Nymeria. "Miss Nymeria, I didn't hear a thing." Nymeria rolled her eyes and let the subject drop. Inside the inner city, under the Sunspear administrator's arrangements, Arthur was shown to a tower chamber with a balcony looking toward the Greenblood. From there, the river flashed silver in the sun. Small boats drifted by, and occasionally a galley with a foreign flag from Plankytown made its way upstream. Palms, olive trees, and figs lined the banks. Beyond them stretched the endless sweep of yellow sand. Edric's voice came from the next room. "Cousin, we've tidied the beds. Can we go to the tourney ground to play?" "Go," Arthur said without turning. "Remember what I taught you this morning. Don't get into trouble." Not long after Edric left, a Sunspear guard knocked and entered. My lord, Prince Oberyn has accepted your request for an audience. Please follow me. Arthur straightened his clothes and composure. Lead the way. They met in a side hall near the Sun Tower, where he could see squires training in the yard below. It was there that Arthur first met the Red Viper, Prince Oberyn Martell. In Dorne, he was called the Red Viper for the way his blade had a way of finding its mark. The Dornish held him in high regard, fierce and unmatched among warriors. After the guard left, Oberyn lounged back in his chair. He had the same widow's peak as Nymeria and the black, viper-like eyes that seemed endless. Years had etched thin lines into his face. His hair was still black and glossy, save for a few silver strands. "Arthur Snow," he said lazily, "I've heard of you. They call you the Vulture Slayer. There are reports you put down the rebellion in the Red Mountain, that you slew the Vulture King and were granted lands." Oberyn continued, leaning forward. Arthur bowed. "Your Highness, what you heard is only half true. I did win a holding, but I did not alone defeat 4,000 barbarians. The Vulture King died by a spear. He ought to have been felled by some brave soldier of Starfall." Surprise flickered in Oberyn's eyes. He had brought the subject up to test Arthur, whether a man would take credit he had not earned. Arthur's refusal to claim the glory made a favorable impression. Oberyn waved him to sit beside him on the bench. After Arthur sat, Oberyn asked, "What is your purpose in coming here?" Arthur met his gaze. "Your Highness, if you would give me a knighthood, I would be grateful." "For giving gratitude?" Oberyn looked amused. "What would I do with your gratitude?" "Arthur Snow's gratitude may not matter much to you," Arthur said. "But I bear the name of the previous Dawn Sword. My mother named me after him. I have the right, if I am knighted, to try to pull Dawn from the White Sword Tower." Oberyn straightened. "Dawn? You? The title of Dawn Sword belongs to an exceptional knight of House Dane. You are not a Dane. My cousin, Edric Dane of Starfall, is my squire," Arthur added, "and I have been recognized by Starfall." Oberyn regarded him thoughtfully. "I don't much care who I knight, nor what oaths they swear, as long as we can be at peace together. But you are not my man. This is our first meeting. Knighting a stranger seldom ends well." He rose and walked to the terrace, looking down over the training yard. "Your predecessor, the previous Dawn Sword, knighted Jaime Lannister, yet the Kingslayer murdered the king the knight had sworn to protect. Prince Rhaegar knighted Gregor Clegane, the Mountain. He harmed Rhaegar's wife Ilya and their children." Arthur listened. When Oberyn mentioned the Mountain, his voice grew tight. Though outwardly calm, his fingers clenched and a fire glinted in his dark eyes. Miss Nymeria had told him how close Oberyn had been to Ilya Martell. Oberyn had never forgotten the loss and nursed a hunger for Lannister blood. The examples were meant to warn. Oberyn had no desire to hand a sword to someone who might turn traitor or worse. Arthur had known he wouldn't walk away with a knighthood today. The interview was to state his intention, make himself known, and show goodwill. Perhaps he could wait for the tourney, ride in the jousts, and earn a reputation, then petition Prince Doran. "You are right," Arthur said. "I cannot deny what the Kingslayer did. When I was at Winterfell, my uncle spoke of it, how Tywin Lannister offered the bodies of Rhaegar's wife and child to show his loyalty. My uncle called it murder and argued with King Robert over it." Arthur bowed. "Excuse me, Your Highness." He had armor to prepare, horses to feel for, and opponents to watch. As he stepped away, Oberyn called, "Wait." Arthur stopped. "Tell me," Oberyn said quietly, "what else did Eddard Stark say about Ilya and her children?" Arthur replied, "Lord Eddard taught us that killing innocents after a war and murdering children are outrageous acts. I sympathize with the fate of your sister and her children. The other parts are common knowledge." Arthur bowed and left. The wheels of a wooden cart creaked in the side hall a short while after he went out. A tall Novosi monk pushed forth a wheelchair, and Prince Doran, small, pale, and composed, sat in it. Oberyn turned to the sound. "I've met Brandon Stark," Oberyn said with a wry edge. "They look very much alike, at least by appearance." Prince Doran watched his brother with a steady calm. "He speaks of bending and stretching," Doran said. "If his father Brandon had taught him that saying, he might not have died in King's Landing." Oberyn's jaw tightened. "I hate that phrase. Our family's words are unbent, unbowed, unbroken." "I have waited a long time," Oberyn said hotly. How much longer must we wait for justice for Ilya and her children? Doran smiled faintly. Leave us, Captain. The captain of the guard from Norvos, hulking and axe-bearing, bowed and withdrew. Miss Nymeria never mentioned him to you? Doran asked quietly, glancing toward where Arthur had been. I don't pry into my daughter's affairs, Oberyn said. I've warned them. If you want to marry, marry. If you do not, find what happiness you can. There's little enough of it in the world, but be careful in your choices. If you wed a fool or a brute, don't come to me to be rescued. I've given you the means to see to yourselves. Doran's tone was soft. I admit, you raised them well. You gave Obella a spear, made Nymeria who she is, taught Tyene to use poison, and Sorella took to your learning. Arianne says if you tied the four of them together, they'd be a red viper with breasts. Oberyn's blaze cooled as Doran spoke. The anger ebbed. He was silent a long moment, then said simply, I love them. They love you, Doran replied. If we act on our anger now to undo what was done, to tear up our enemies' plots in haste, it will cost tens of thousands of lives in Dorne for nothing. In the end, we will not win justice for Ilya and her children. We will only die, both of us. His voice never lost its calm. Our words are unbent, unbowed, unbroken. Our descendants will live for vengeance if we cannot, and die for it if we must. Oberyn, do you really want to see that? Our blood spent so others may be unmade by the same fury. Oberyn's face softened. His fire cooled into resignation. He looked at his brother and, with a rueful cast to his mouth, said, Doran, you always know how to persuade me. The tournament grounds lay beyond the last gate of the Triple Gate. The area had been cleared and wooden stands and platforms raised. Armored landed knights in many sigils, with squires and men-at-arms, camped not far off. Tents and pennants stretched out across the plain. Even more numerous than the knights were the hawkers and merchants, a few performing troops, prostitutes, pickpockets, and a crush of onlookers. Now and then Arthur saw foreigners, Taroshi with bright hair, summer islanders with dark skin. Archery, melees, and jousts, Jimmy Sunderland murmured in his ear. He'd arrived before Arthur. Archery and melee are as usual, but the jousting's different this time. How different? Arthur asked, buying honey-roasted sausages with garlic and chili and a small flask of a pear brandy from a Tyroshi vendor. Prince Doran holds the tourney for Princess Arianne's 20th name day, Jimmy said. Traditionally, she'll sit beside him and be named the Queen of Love and Beauty. 5 champions receive her favors and defend her honor. Everyone else is a challenger. Beat a champion, and you take his place until someone beats you. The jousting runs 3 days. The 5 who remain at the end decide whether the maiden keeps the crown or gives it to another. Arthur blinked. He'd thought there was only one champion who could decide the Queen of Love and Beauty and make some modest request. So the final 5 can make requests to Prince Doran? Jimmy took a bite of the sausage Arthur handed him. Probably not, Arthur. Arthur swallowed and chewed. His hope that the Red Viper might knight him slipped farther away. The sausage's mix of honey, garlic, and chili was oddly good. He pushed the disappointment aside. It was his first formal joust. He'd do his best and see what fate brought. Just then, Edric ran up. Cousin, I've already registered you for the joust. With Edric came Vicwood and Vic Six, and a knight Arthur didn't recognize. His breastplate bore the Dane sigil. The man was striking, an aquiline nose over a clean-shaven chin, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, thick silver hair streaked by a ribbon of black across his forehead. He tucked his helmet under his arm and smiled. I am Gerald Grafton, of a branch of House Dane in Highgarden. I have stayed in Sunspear. Folks call me Darkstar. Darkstar. Arthur's memory of the tales tightened. In the original account, it was Darkstar who had tried to cut down hostage Princess Myrcella, whose horse had shied at the last moment, leaving her cheek slashed to the bone and her right ear cut away. Arthur met Gerald's gaze calmly. Lord Gerald, what relation is Viscount Dimitri to you? Older brother. Gerald glanced Arthur up and down. I regret not being able to stand with my kin when House Dane was in peril. Did my brother tell you anything of me when you passed through Highgarden? Arthur asked. He had indeed rested in Highgarden for a few days on his journey. No, he remembers only Arthur Dane, always has. Gerald shrugged. My house's line goes back to the Dawn Age, 10,000 years, they say. But whether it's my brother or any other, they remember Arthur Dane. He was a great knight, Jimmy said. He had a great sword, Gerald sniffed. And a great heart, Jimmy shot back sharply. Gerald looked amused and then took a long draught from a water skin. It did not smell of wine but lemon. He wiped his mouth and offered unsweetened lemonade. Want some? When they all declined, he set the skin away and pointed at Arthur's brandy. Best not to drink before you joust. I myself never cared for it. Before he left, he inclined his head. May the gods bless you and bring you honor in the lists. Arthur watched other knights prepare with a growing sense of seriousness. Few faces were familiar beyond the Dane men and a handful of fowlers who'd come with them. Some measured the ground with long strides, others studied nearby opponents' practice, some barked commands at squires and tended their mounts themselves. Jousting here was no mere sport. The winner claimed the loser's weapons, armor, and mount. The ransom might be trivial to a lord, but could ruin a poor landed knight. That made every tilt a business as well as glory. Weather, footing, the state of the mount, everything mattered. Edric, unable to contain his excitement, soon dragged Arthur to see the performers. Shadow puppets and acrobats. Arthur wasn't much for it. As dusk fell, he told his cousins not to stay out too late and returned to their lodging in Sunspear. Ariane Martell still tasted the sting of her father's letter, the one he'd written to her brother Quentin in the north. One day you will sit in my place and rule Dorne. She had read it secretly and felt as if she'd fallen into an ice cave, then into flame. She couldn't tell what she'd done to deserve such a fate. Was it the day Quentin was born? Or the day she was? She brooded in the water gardens, sleeves pushed up, when someone slipped into the pool beside her and Teen Sand's sweet voice came to her ear. Miss Nymeria, why didn't the Fowler twins come with you? Teen asked. Old Falcon wouldn't let them come, Miss Nymeria said, setting a tray on the bath's lip. A jug of wine and several cups rested upon it. He said I'm too close to them. That's a shame. Tien adopted a nun-like air and grinned. Back at the water gardens, I used to ride on my sister Jane's head. No, maybe Genelyn's, can't tell them apart. She pounced and pulled Miss Nymeria into the bath. Water splashed, the two sisters laughed and played. When they stilled and Ariane wiped her face, she asked, Miss Nymeria, did you travel here with an old man? Miss Nymeria shrugged, free of Tyene, poured 3 cups in quick succession and said, Not with him. I found a companion, a bastard. A sand? Ariane raised an eyebrow. I don't remember Old Falcon having a bastard. Not a sand, a snow. Snow, that's for northern bastards. Tyene leaned forward, curious. Miss Nymeria, what do northerners taste like? Miss Nymeria only sipped and smiled. The snow, I mean, is Arthur's snow. She handed a cup to Ariane. He's grown powerful around Starfall. Even young Lord Edric serves as his cupbearer now. Ariane's eyes lit up. If she wanted to protect her inheritance, she needed allies among Dorne's great houses. House Dane was one such house. She thought of possibilities. Then the thudding of heavy feet outside made her sit up. The eldest Sand sister announced herself before she entered. Obara Sand, always like a storm when she came. Ariane, Obara said as she stepped into the pool, breathless. I'll ride the lists as a mystery knight. Give me your favor, and I'll defend you. I'll unhorse every challenger. Ariane looked at Obara, spear in hand, blazing temper in her eyes, and believed her. Oberyn had armed each daughter, Obara with spear and fury, Miss Nymeria with social grace and beauty, Tyene with poisons, Sorella with books and curiosity. And Prince Doran, he'd given Ariane a letter and several potential husbands old enough to be her grandfather. Lord Walder Frey, Ben Beesbury, 80, blind and toothless, Elton Estermont, Giles Rosby who coughed, and Grandson the Greybeard. The Martell words, unbowed, unbent, unbroken, felt like a joke. She drained her cup of amber peach wine. The sweet, peachy nectar calmed much of her rage. What's this called? She asked. Amber peach, Miss Nymeria said. A new drink from Arthur's lands, made from peaches and blossom nectar. Obara splashed and demanded an answer. Ariane, will you give me your favor? Ariane set the cup down. I trust you, Obara, and I'd rather have you defending me, but my father chooses the 5 champions just as he chose 5 husbands he deemed suitable. The gods give us the choice of our weapons. Obara's voice sharpened. She told of her father's claim, how the man had thrust a spear at her feet and backhanded her mother, saying that boys and girls both have to fight, and pointed to the spear as a choice. Do you choose the spear or the tears? Obara demanded. Ariane shook her head. I don't have a choice. My father is not Oberyn. He doesn't give me choice. No one can take your choice from you, Miss Nymeria said, pouring another cup. Doran is not the gods. Ariane looked at the three women, their faces lit by the lamplight. I have a plan to resist my father. I need your help. Tyane leaned on the bath's edge and smiled sweetly. I'll help. Miss Nymeria and Obara exchanged a look. Both nodded. When Arthur returned to his room later that night, he found Miss Nymeria sitting with her eyes half closed. She opened them at the sound of his door. How did it go? She asked. Arthur lit the candelabra and sat. Not smoothly. Your father, Prince Doran, won't knight someone he's just met. You need my help, she asked. You said you wouldn't interfere, he began, surprised. You said you'd keep things simple. Miss Nymeria's mouth quirked. I changed my mind. Why? Arthur leaned forward. He'd pulled favors and secrets from people before, but she had been stubborn. Now she'd reversed herself with a breathless, impossible explanation. Because of love, she said simply. Love, Arthur echoed. If you sleep with another woman, she said, nonchalant, I will duel her with a dagger. Arthur blinked. Unless she is Ariane or another sand snake. In that case, I'll share you with them. I love them. He stared. The culture of Dorne was more open than his home, but her words still startled him. He kept his face composed. Miss Nymeria, what are you saying? She smiled in the candlelight, a small, secretive curve. Arthur cleared his throat and forced a steady voice. Tell me plainly. What do you want me to do? What are you trying to achieve? She asked. Have you registered for the joust? When he said yes, she asked the question that startled him most. How well do you think you do against my father, Oberyn? You want me to fight him? Arthur said. He hesitated. Winning would be a humiliation to Oberyn's memory, perhaps to Dorne. Losing would leave him dishonored. If I beat him or if I lose, either way it seems wrong. Miss Nymeria's eyes flashed. Are you afraid of him? Arthur shook his head. We've seen each other for days. You know what I am. Daughters know their fathers better than anyone, she said. Defeat my father, and with our help, I'll guarantee you'll be knighted. Arthur sat back, the whole scheme settling in like a fevered plan. These Dornish women spoke in games and edges, choices and bargains. He didn't yet know what they plotted, only that they meant to change the rules of the tourney, and that somehow his place in it had suddenly become anything but simple. After Arthur had pressed her until he'd sworn to keep her secret, Miss Nymeria finally laid out the plan. They would have all 5 champions chosen by Prince Doran defeated and replaced by 5 challengers chosen by Ariane herself. In other words, Princess Ariane intended to use her own people to win the crown of Queen of Love and Beauty. It was a little reckless, bordering on a spectacle, but if it worked, it would both embarrass Prince Doran and demonstrate Ariane's influence and capabilities. Who was the brilliant mind behind this? Arthur asked. Who else? Miss Nymeria answered wearily. Ariane. My uncle's marriage arrangements for her were unbearable. Obara and Tyane think so too, she added. Tyne even helped Ariane elope once. The intended groom was Willis Tyrell, heir to Highgarden, someone Prince Doran refused. They were caught, and my father brought them back halfway. Hearing that, Arthur understood why Doran had always offered Ariane only elderly suitors. In the original story, Doran had been plotting against the Iron Throne and had even arranged a secret betrothal between Ariane Martell and Viserys Targaryen, witnessed in Braavos. The secret was too grave to trust to Ariane, and Doran feared both a leak and the suspicions an unmarried daughter might invite, so he kept her from suitable matches. Arthur thought the quarrel between father and daughter was more political than personal. The tourney challenge, he decided, was a manageable risk. Are you sure that if I defeat your father, you can get him to knight me? Arthur asked. You must be the last one standing, the champion, Miss Nymeria said. Don't worry, my father is like me in one respect. He's not one to cling rigidly to rules. They all assumed the Red Viper, Prince Oberyn, would be one of Doran's chosen champions to defend Ariane's honor. Come inside, she said, blowing out the candle. I'll tell you the flaws in my father's joust. It may help. The so-called flaws proved of limited practical use against Oberyn. What proved far more helpful was Miss Nymeria's choice of sparring partner for Arthur. Sir Daemon Sand, who had served Oberyn as a squire and been knighted by him, the quintessential bastard among bastards. "I was knighted by Prince Oberyn and served as his squire," Daemon said, "but I'm not him. I can't perfectly imitate his strength." After a day's practice, Sir Daemon flung the cork lance to a squire, dismounted, and added, "Besides, this is practice. Real combat is different." "You've helped me a great deal," Arthur said. "If I can't win after this, then I simply don't have the strength. It's like an open book exam. If I still fail, there's nothing more I could have done." He shrugged off his vine armor. White chalk dust streaked it, the marks of practice. They'd been charging with cork lances, rubbing chalk on the tips, and then checking the marks to see where blows had landed and how to adjust. The vine armor absorbed much of the impact. Arthur's body only rocked slightly before he steadied himself. Because both men were bastards, they found common ground and became fast companions. At dinner, Arthur thanked Daemon for sparring with him and asked how they'd won him over. Daemon gave a wry smile. "Teen poisoned me," he said. Seeing Arthur's look, he hurried on. "Not literal poison. She persuaded me. What they ask doesn't violate a knight's oath, so I agreed to be one of the challengers." He didn't want to linger on it. "Can you tell me about your armor?" "It's vine armor, made from vines. The blacksmith in my land developed it for Dorne's heat," Arthur said, chewing a purple olive. "It keeps you cool and light, but still offers good protection. If you like it, tell me your size and I'll have them make one for me," Daemon said quickly. "I'll pay." Over wine, they talked of places and travels. Daemon had never left Dorne. Arthur's tale of the North fascinated him. Freedom and ease, one of the few advantages for bastards who don't inherit lands. Daemon said, lifting his cup. "To freedom and ease," Arthur toasted. Daemon's face grew red after a few cups. He sighed, admitting a long-nursed grievance. "There are disadvantages to being a bastard. I once proposed to Arianne. She refused. She wouldn't say why, but it was my status. Even if she had consented, my father would never have allowed it. I'm better for her than those old men, too old to perform a husband's duties." Arthur listened quietly. He felt, with a small private amusement, that Daemon had been poisoned by Arianne's charms as much as Tyenne's persuasion. In the days that followed, Arthur devoted himself to sparring with Daemon. As the tourney neared, they gave up the drinks. Each evening, Miss Nymeria updated him on the plan. "We've found 7 challengers, including you and Daemon. On the day of the tourney, you'll all conceal your identities as mystery knights and challenge Doran's 5 champions," she told him. "7?" Arthur murmured. "May the 7 bless the plan." "Want to know who the others are?" she asked eagerly. "No." Arthur shook his head. "I'll focus on defeating your father. I won't be distracted." He found himself admiring Prince Doran's secrecy more and more. Keeping Arianne in the dark about the secret marriage tied to the dragon was, he thought, a shrewd and perhaps necessary choice. There was one day left before the tournament, and Sunspear had filled with Dorne's principal noble houses. Registration for the events had closed. In the Sun Tower, the great hall glittered beneath its golden dome and inlaid glass. Beneath the dome lay the circular throne room, its thick windows set with stained glass, the pale marble floor worn smooth. On the high platform stood 2 almost identical seats. One bore the golden spear of House Martell, the other the Rhoynar Sunburst. Prince Doran occupied the spear-backed chair. Princess Arianne, the center of the tournament's pageantry, sat at his side. "Lords, ladies, and sir," the master of ceremonies' voice carried through the hall so everyone could hear. Arthur stood in a shadowed corner with Edric. Below the platform, the crowd was made up of Dorne's principal nobles in silk and satin robes, sleeves flowing, family sigils embroidered on their breasts. Arthur could name most of the principal houses at a glance, if not the lesser lords. He noticed Countess Bremon and her children, and Sir Irvin, the commander who had led the Bremon incursion against Starfall's lands. Edric whispered at his elbow. "Cousin, I've done well these past days, training with Sir Daemon. I've made a lot of friends." "Who?" Arthur glanced over, curious. With so many preparations to make and little time to mind Edric, Arthur had left him to do the social work with Vicwood and Vic Six as companions. "Mostly lads my age," Edric said, tapping fingers on his knee. "A lot of squires, and Prince Tristan Martell, Sorella, and 3 of the Sand Snakes." "3 Sand Snakes?" Arthur repeated. Edric nodded eagerly. The eldest is Ilia Sand. She always smells a little of horses. I can't remember the names of the others. Sorella knows nearly everything, like Master Oswell, but she's very dark. She said her mother's from the Summer Isles and was a captain. Prince Tristan likes Sivas. He doesn't mind that I always lose. The Master of Ceremonies' voice rose again to name the champions who would guard the Queen of Love and Beauty's honorary crown for the mounted lists. Prince Oberyn Martell, Count Franklin Fowler, Sir Ulrich Uller, Sir Roger Illyrian, and Sir Alt Gorgles. To be chosen a champion was an honor and a clear sign of favor from Prince Doran. One by one, the 5 men climbed the platform to receive the tokens from Princess Ariane. Arthur knew them all. Oberyn needed no introduction, Count Fowler likewise. Sir Ulrich Uller was Ilya's great-uncle and kin to the man who had taken the Red Viper's current paramour. The Ullers ruled Hellholt. Sir Roger Illyrian was heir to God's Grace and the father of Sir Daemon Sand. Sir Alt Gorgles was heir of the Salt Shore. Doran had once served as a squire there. Arthur, my opponent's been decided, Sir Daemon Sand said softly at his shoulder, watching the men on the platform take their tokens. Arthur blinked. Who? My father. A bright, half-boyish pride lit Daemon's face. I asked. I wanted to ride him as a mystery knight. Before, there were other things, poison, threats from Tyene, but this time I wanted to do it for myself. Win or lose, I'm ready. Arthur felt a smile creep up against his will. A father and son tilt in Dorne. It sounded half like a jest and half like reckoning. Ariane finished presenting the tokens, and when the ceremony concluded, Prince Doran rose, Ariane supporting him, to speak. Where Oberyn was fire, Doran was deep, still water. Arthur had watched him in council before. Calm, measured, a slight twitch in his face from gout the only break in his placid features. His voice held the same steady, guarded note. Cautious, quiet, resilient, Arthur thought. When Doran sat, the nobles came forward with gifts and pledges of fealty. When it was Starfall's turn, Arthur stepped forward with Edric to present the Dane family's offerings. Up close, Doran's hair was almost gray, neatly kept. His eyes were ringed with heavy bags, and his fingers and joints were thick with gout. Arthur handed the gift list to a servant, bowed, and said, Your Highness, on behalf of House Dane of Starfall, I offer the Martells our sincere greetings and our loyalty. May the 7 bless you, Prince Doran answered, inclining his head. You did well in the Red Mountain. Enjoy Sunspear, and may you take the honor you deserve in the lists. With the audience over, Arthur and Edric left the hall and made their way back to their rooms. In the privacy of their chamber, Edric could barely contain himself. What name will you take in the lists? He asked, eyes bright as Arthur checked his gear. Heart Knight. Arthur set a shield on the bed, a peach-painted heart at its center. I won't ride tomorrow. The joust runs 3 days. I want to watch Oberyn first and make a few more preparations. Jimmy Sunderland, wiping the blade of Jean-Loup with an oiled cloth nearby, added, The lists aren't only for strength. Within the rules, strategy matters. The old instructors and the other Sir think Prince Oberyn the most dangerous knight in Dorne. If you can beat the Red Viper, you'll be a household name. Satisfied with his armor, guards, and weapons, Arthur chose not to train that evening. He went with Edric and the squires into the market outside Sunspear to clear his head. It was his first proper tourney, and the thought of facing a top-ranked fighter weighed upon him. But he understood the balance. Last-minute tension would not be helpful. He needed to keep calm, rest, and be ready. Chapter 1 and 19, Sunspear Tournament. At the Triple Gate Tournament grounds, high in the stands, Edric scanned the scene. Cousin, I've never seen so many people. The tournament really draws a crowd. It was still dark, but throngs of commoners had already gathered outside the arena fence or had climbed onto roofs and battlements of nearby houses to get a good view. Vendors threaded through the crowd, hawking lemonade, pickled olives, and roasted snake meat. Watching the tournament is entertainment most people don't have to pay for, he added. Everyone enjoys it. Arthur waved a hand and called a vendor up from the arena, tossing him a silver stag. Where there are crowds, demand rises. Vendors, troops, and pickpockets all come sniffing around. Edric took the lemonade and olives and added, and the blacksmiths, the farriers, and the stable hands who serve the knights. True. Arthur knew Edric had lately been spending most of his time with knights' squires, learning the ropes of being a squire. As dawn brightened, palanquins bearing nobles arrived one after another, and the stands filled. At the north end of the arena, 5 tents had been set up for the champions. 5 shields bearing various coats of arms hung above them. There was the spear and sun for Prince Oberyn Martell, the masked falcon for Count Franklin Fowler, Sir Ulrich Uller's yellow and red flames, Sir Roger Illyrian's red and black golden hand, and Ser Elt Gorgonless's red cockatrice. "You came early," Miss Nemea said as she sat beside Arthur. "Are you planning to enter the lists tomorrow or the day after?" "Obviously," Arthur replied with mock solemnity. "I think Prince Oberyn will make it through the first day. What do you think?" Miss Nemea gave him a look. "That's not certain. Anything can happen in the lists." The heir to the Reach, Willis Tyrell, had his leg broken by his horse in a tourney once. My father was his opponent. Edric leaned over. "I've heard that rumor. The squires say even the fairest flowers can break a leg under a hard sun." "Ed, that was an accident," Miss Nemea said. "My father told me himself. He didn't mean it. Afterward, the two of them often wrote, trading notes about breeding horses and hawks. Why aren't you over with Ariane? The view should be better there," Arthur asked. On the high platform at the arena's north side, the Martell banner, the spear and sun, fluttered. Prince Doran sat in the principal chair, and Princess Ariane in the seat of honor beside him. Around them stood a circle of retainers. The captain of the guard from Norvos with his long axe, a gray-robed maester, the administrator, the treasurer, Prince Doran's eldest son Quentin, and his second son Tristane, and their cousin Sir Manfrey Martell, who had served as acting castellan of Sunspear while Prince Doran withdrew to the Water Gardens. Though Sir Manfrey held authority as castellan, everyone in Sunspear knew Oberyn was the one who wielded true power. Sitting near Ariane were many of the Sand Snakes and Oberyn's companion, Ilaria Sand. Miss Nemea narrowed her eyes. "What, tired of me already?" No, I didn't mean that," Arthur blurted, waving his hand. "Just asking." A series of horn blasts cut across the morning. Edric leapt up and pointed toward the tents. "Look, the champions chosen to guard Princess Ariane's crown of love and beauty are coming out." The 5 knights who had been given tokens by Princess Ariane the day before stepped from their tents in Dornish-style armor and helmets, their families' colors proudly displayed. Squires led their war horses past, and racks held blunted pine lances for the joust, about 3.4 meters long. Prince Oberyn was the most striking. He wore a great helm whose flattened top had been curved to better deflect blows, and atop it sat a coiled viper of red copper. Narrow slits in the visor gave him sight and breath. His greaves, vambraces, gorget, surcoat, and skirt were Martell red, yellow, and orange. His surcoat was layered with gleaming copper scales of many hues, catching the sun so that his chest flashed the sigil, a red sun pierced by a golden spear. He bore a round steel shield, highly polished, the spear and sun forged in a mix of red, yellow, and white gold with brass. The 5 champions mounted and rode a lap around the outer track, basking in the crowd's cheers, then halted beneath Prince Doran's stand with lances lowered and swords at their sides. Arthur had to admit they made a fine show. Beside him, Edric stared intently at the knights, oblivious to the lemonade dripping from his fingers. The horns sounded again. Amid the roar of the crowd and the herald's introductions, 5 challengers rode into the arena from the south. Arthur recognized 2 at once, Count Anders Euronwood and Sir Elwyn Brymon. The herald announced that one of the others was a landed knight, while the remaining 2 were mysterious men whose names were not given. "Do you think Count Anders will choose the Red Viper who slew his father, or the Old Falcon, his longtime rival?" Miss Nemea asked. "The Old Falcon," Arthur said without hesitation. "Prince Doran has sent his eldest son as a foster to Euronwood. Anders won't be so clumsy." Count Anders rode forward and, as Arthur had predicted, leveled his lance at the masked falcon's shield of Count Franklin Fowler. Miss Nemea gave a soft, disappointed sound. "I was hoping he'd pick my father." Because her cousin Quentin had been fostered at Euronwood, Miss Nemea felt closer to Ariane and harbored an instinctive dislike of the Euronwoods. "Are those 2 mysterious knights from your household?" Arthur asked. The taller of the 2 mysterious knights had aimed at Sir Roger Illyrian's red and black golden hand. The slimmer had chosen Ser Elt Gorgonless's red cockatrice. What do you mean your? They're ours, Miss Nemea snapped. Want to know who they are? No, Arthur said. He had been practicing mounted jousting for some time, and now that he knew Ariane's purpose in naming champions, he wasn't eager to pry into the challengers' identities. Other than Daemon Sand, he didn't really know who the other challengers were. Chapter 120, Sunspear Tournament, Part 2. I'm curious, Edric asked. Can Miss Nymeria tell me? Actually, I'm only guessing. Miss Nymeria pointed toward the lists. Look at the tall rider who chose Sir Roger Illyrian. That's Daemon Sand. Did he pick him because he's worried his father might be unhorsed in the first round? Arthur said, frowning as he watched the arena. He had already made his own guesses from the physique of the riders and the pairings. The other one must be Obara, Miss Nymeria added without answering him. She never hesitates. Always decisive. They watched as the 10 knights, 5 on the southern track and 5 on the northern, took their places. The crowd quieted to a tense hush. After a blast of horns, the 10 warhorses surged forward in a single thunderous rush. Lances braced, riders tucked close to their mounts, 40 iron-shod hooves pounded the earth and the wooden bullpens shuddered. Wood and metal blurred together in the first pass. Shields answered lances with cracking blows, and 10 lances shattered almost at once. "Someone's been unseated," cried a voice in the crowd. In the swirl of chaos, Arthur saw a knight stagger as a blow caught him on the shoulder, and he pitched from his saddle. Arthur, who had been watching the Red Viper closely, added, "That's Prince Oberyn's man." The fallen knight lay still for a few moments. He might have hit his head, and then squires hurried into the lists and carried him away. The remaining 8 knights cantered back to their pens. They cast aside their broken lances, and squires passed up fresh shafts. Prince Oberyn, having already judged his champion's victory, dismounted, removed his mask, bowed briefly to his lady and daughters in the stands, and then sat outside his champion's pavilion to watch the rest of the matches. When the crowd saw that all 10 lances had shattered on the first pass, a great cheer went up. It was an omen of close bouts and stout strength among the competitors. The second pass was no less fierce. Horses whinnied and surged again. The platform underneath them trembled. Miss Nymeria, whose tone was usually genteel, had her eyes fixed on the lists and gripped Arthur's hand without thinking. The charge closest to them was between the Old Falcon, Count Franklin, and Earl Anders. Both knights lowered their lances and thundered past each other. Franklin's seat lipped and faltered. He nearly fell. "Looks like the first champion to lose his seat may be the Old Falcon," Arthur remarked. "He is old, after all." "The Old Falcon never much excelled at jousting, even when he was young," Miss Nymeria said. "It's not just his age." She was right. In the next pass, Earl Anders unhorsed Count Franklin. Franklin sprang up and drew his longsword. Anders abandoned his broken lance, drew a spiked mace, and dismounted to press the advantage on foot. At the same time elsewhere, Sir Daemon Sand settled his bout with the man he had chosen. Daemon's lance struck the other knight's helm clean off. When the man's face was revealed, it proved to be Sir Roger Illyrian. At first, the knight did not know the identity of the masked challenger, but when the truth became clear, Sir Roger raised a hand in salute and dismounted, conceding the tilt. He was the first of the champions to lose his seat. "Anything can happen in the lists," Miss Nymeria said with a smile. "I suppose your guess was wrong?" The masked knights continued to surprise. Obara, masquerading as one such anonymous rider, broke 4 lances and unseated the heir of the Salt Coast. Her shield bore a burning tower, and the squires hung that burning tower escutcheon where the Salt Coast heirs had been. With 2 masked riders already claiming champions' places, the crowd's excitement only grew louder. "There are 3 more days of this," Miss Nymeria said. "Only the last knight standing is the champion. Mysterious knights draw a lot of challenges later. Not being known is a disadvantage. I once advised Obara. Obviously, it didn't take." "What of Daemon?" Arthur asked. "He doesn't strike me as an impatient man." Miss Nymeria blinked at him. "A bastard hankers after honor. More than that, he craves his father's acknowledgement." Just then, Edric called out, "The 2 counts are about to finish." Arthur turned his attention. Earl Anders's shield was scored and splintered by longsword strikes. The black gated arms painted upon it were a fractured gateway now. The old falcon's falcon crest had been smashed from his helm, and his shield lay dinged and beaten by Anders's mace. He was forced to parry continually and had no strength left to reply. After another withering exchange, the old falcon's shield was knocked from his grasp. He raised a hand in simple surrender. When the dust settled, only Sir Irvin Brimon and Sir Ulrich Uller remained for a final deciding pass. Between them, they had splintered 8 lances and still stood level. Then, to the shock of the onlookers, Sir Ulrich deliberately dropped his shield and took his lance in both hands. Miss Nymeria gasped. There's a saying in Dorne about the Ullers. Half of them are mad, and the other half are worse. Arthur nodded. Rumors are not without reason. In jousting, a knight usually holds his shield in one hand and his lance in the other. The shield takes much of the impact and cushions blows. To lay the shield down voluntarily is almost suicidal, like fighting naked. It is a desperate, all-or-nothing gambit. Edric, standing near, covered his eyes and watched the meeting through his fingers as the horns sounded. Sir Ulrich rode straight and true with both hands on his shaft. He struck the vulture device on Sir Irvin's shield and then flicked the lance to arc toward Irvin's chest. For some reason, Irvin's lance went wide and shattered harmlessly against Ulrich's cuirass. The force threw Sir Irvin's sand steed up on its haunches. The rider was pitched from the saddle and slapped hard onto the turf. Miss Nymeria's voice was almost light. How does it feel to see your opponent taken down so awkwardly? Arthur only shrugged. Fair fight. Well struck. Sir Irvin was the very commander who had, under the pretense of supporting Starfall City, led Brimon forces with designs that many suspected were unwelcome. Over the last year and a half, Brimon and Starfall, both along the torrent, had sparred often. Viscount Dimitri, the Lord of Highgarden and a man given to feasts and comforts, had chosen not to attend the tourney, in part because of those tensions. Arthur, Maester Oswell, and the old instructor had discussed Brimon's motives at length and had come to a consensus. The Brimon family likely saw Edric as inexperienced and coveted the title of Guardian of the Torrent River held by the Dane family.